Avada stared at the intricate magical framework etched into the cardboard box and at the troll that seemed to be sleeping inside. Voldemort really intended to drag the whole thing onto the pirate ship. He remembered the original Halloween, Quirrell releasing a troll as a diversion while he tried to slip into the fourth-floor corridor to steal the Philosopher's Stone. Snape had been waiting, and the plan had failed. Avada had had no accomplice, had pretended to panic and run to report the incident, and then tried to slip away from the teachers to sneak to the fourth floor. Too many flaws. This time, with Voldemort's help, he only needed to sit in his classroom seat and attend the feast, wait for the troll to roar through the castle, and when everyone was thrown into chaos, he would rush to the fourth floor. Avada glanced at the runes and wards stamped on the box. Strong protection, remote activation, Dohanin, automatic destruction, stimulate troll, monitor surroundings, and at the spell enhancing the troll's voice. The plan made sense. Though his own trip would be pointless, first, the stone wasn't in that corridor room at all, and second, he had no way of getting past Fluffy. Voldemort would believe otherwise. According to Voldemort's calculations, Avada would panic when he became known as the one who released the troll and confront Quirrell. Then Voldemort, posing as a mentor, could reveal that he had taught Quirrell the unforgivable curses, threaten exposure for the troll incident, and promise rewards, power, position, if Quirrell obeyed. 9 times out of 10, a student who didn't know the original plot would fall for it. Avada smiled inwardly. Luckily, it had been him. If anyone else had been chosen, they wouldn't have had the chance to catch Quirrell's attention with a paper on Imperio and be personally instructed. Still, he couldn't cut ties with Voldemort yet, or let him detect anything odd. Voldemort's mental powers needed time to be fully analyzed. For now, he had to do as directed. But trolls were among the easiest aggressive creatures to deal with. No special magic, no poisons, low magical resistance, just brute strength and a clumsy brain. This one had only been enhanced with a loud voice spell. The situation was manageable without outside help, and if he told anyone now, it would be difficult to explain how he had seen through the box's protections to know there was a troll inside. After this was finished, he would have to contact Dumbledore and ensure he wasn't being manipulated. Otherwise, he'd have to endure a full legilimency from Dumbledore. For the moment, though, he had to make sure the troll hurt no one. In Quirrell's original story, the troll had been meant to kill Harry Potter. He pocketed the small cardboard box, rubbed his tired eyes, and went back to the Hufflepuff common room. From his dormitory, he brought out a stack of bottles and jars and began to brew in plain view. A few curious students drifted over. "What are you doing?" someone asked. "Making a base for the draught of living death," Avada answered, rubbing his eyes and yawning. "My sleep's been awful. Tonight I plan to sleep like the dead." "One night of sleeping like the dead and you'll be groggy all day," another warned. "Tomorrow's the Halloween feast. You'll miss all the food if you can't eat." "I'll only drink a little at the feast," he said. "If I'm sluggish afterward, I can brew an invigoration potion in a few minutes. Careful not to get scolded by Professor Snape again like last term." "You still remember that?" Avada said, half amused. The next morning, he shuffled into potions class in a daze, and of course, potions was the first lesson. Snape's expression darkened. "I thought I told you last term not to overuse invigoration potions," Snape said. "Yes, Professor. I didn't use any this time." "Well then," Snape sniffed, "you won't come to my lesson having drunk a base for the draught of living death and nearly falling asleep. Gryffindor loses a point." Snape gave him a withering look and returned to the podium. Avada had to bite back a smile. Even a master like Snape, at a glance, couldn't tell that Avada had long since shaken off any real effects of the draught. His apparent drowsiness was a disguise, meant to fool the box's surveillance and any Hufflepuffs watching. His acting skills had improved. Staying close to Voldemort, oddly enough, had sharpened them. At the Halloween feast, the great hall glittered with pumpkin lanterns and bats. Avada took his seat and stole a glance toward the Gryffindor table. Hermione Granger was not there. Damn it, did the plot really not deviate where he didn't interfere? Irritated, he casually transfigured a bat and set it on Cedric's head. "It suits you," he said. Cedric blinked. "I'm in need of a pick-me-up. I shouldn't have drunk that draught of living death yesterday. Avada ruffled his hair, then stood. I'll go back to the dorm and brew a little invigoration potion, or I won't enjoy the food. Don't overdo it, Cedric said, the bat wobbling on his head, playing along. You gonna let it go? Avada wiped his eyes and caught Quirrell's encouraging smile from the teacher's table. He left the great hall and headed to the underground classrooms. He had thought about keeping things simple, pretending to have a stomachache, slipping away to release the troll. But if the Hufflepuffs heard the troll and remembered he had been in the dungeon, they might come rushing down to help, wrecking the plan. He needed a plausible excuse for leaving the Great Hall and an even easier way to reappear later. On the dungeon level, he heard a soft sobbing. He paused, murmured a quick apology, took out the small cardboard box, and set it in an inconspicuous corner. Then he walked briskly toward the Hufflepuff common room. Once he was well outside the box's monitoring range, he drew his wand, cast a charm to eliminate sound and footprints from the soles of his shoes, and then slipped a disillusionment charm over himself. Like a professional, he returned to the underground classrooms, silent, unseen, wand gripped tight, eyes fixed on the small cardboard box. 62. What imperious curse? This is my brother Imperio. A few minutes later, the small paper box suddenly burst into flames, turned into a wisp of green smoke, and vanished into the air. In its place, a troll had materialized. Hoo-hoo! The creature scraped itself up from the ground, gray-skinned and massive, with a surprisingly small head and a foul smell. It mumbled and scratched its head, looking around as if puzzled by the unfamiliar ceiling. Then it sniffed the air, its head turning toward the girl's bathroom at the scent of food. It gave a happy, low growl and shuffled toward the bathroom door, clutching a crude wooden club, completely unaware of how far its previous roar, magnified by the sonorous charm, had carried. Now is the time. Avada leveled his wand at the back of the troll's head and whispered a single word. Imperio, not Avada Kedavra. As a supposedly law-abiding wizard, he would never use an unforgivable curse. But he missed his distant relative, Imperio, and gave a quiet nod to the name. As the elder brother of the three unforgivable curses, he had spent the last year studying the nascent magic of the Imperio, delving into mental power, and even received 2 months of personal instruction from Lord Voldemort. He had mastered the Imperio enough to control others, although not yet proficiently enough to cast it non-verbally. Still, this practical use would deepen his understanding. As he spoke, he felt an invisible thread extend from his wand into the troll's brain, probing the walnut-sized mind. It was as if he could send his thoughts directly into the creature, and whatever he told it, it would obey. Growl 2 more times, he suggested tentatively. Hoo-hoo! A muffled roar burst from the troll's throat, magnified by the sonorous charm to echo through the castle. Why wasn't Hermione moving? It had already roared twice. Avada listened to the chaotic screams from the Great Hall. Was she too frightened to move? He decided to try again. Roar 2 more times. Morse code, telling her to run. He almost issued the command when he realized the sonorous charm had faded from the troll. Of course, Lord Voldemort wouldn't leave such obvious traces. All right, plan B. Slowly approach the bathroom. Make slow, heavy footsteps. Pace around the door for a while. The troll obliged, stamping dull thuds outside the bathroom, but the door did not open. Avada's patience was thinning. If the professors arrived, he'd be exposed. He'd planned a backup, but the uncertainty made him reluctant to use it. Is she betting the troll hasn't found her? He wondered. Should I smash the door and force her out? No, that would be cruel and dangerous. Right. Make the troll head to the Great Hall and run into the professors halfway there. Let Voldemort puzzle that out himself. Just as he was about to command the troll to turn, he heard 2 anxious voices. Harry! Ron! Where are you? Harry and Ron came rushing around the stairs, wands out, calling Hermione's name. Since people were practically offering themselves up, the troll couldn't do nothing. Avada steered it to roar and brandish its club at Harry and Ron. A clear message. I'm fierce, now run. The effect was immediate. Both boys froze, faces blanching, then shakily raised their wands. Hermione, where are you? If you're in the bathroom, the troll's right here. Get out of there. Avada had to admire their courage, very Gryffindor. He almost made the troll crack its own skull with its club and flee, but he couldn't risk breaking the illusion. Roar! 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 The troll lurched forward, frightening Harry and Ron backwards and, crucially, inching away from the girls' bathroom door. Click. The bathroom door flew open, and a tousled head peered out. Hurry and hide inside. The troll can't seem to come into the bathroom. Hermione, Harry and Ron shouted, and, seizing the moment, dashed past the lumbering troll at breakneck speed and slammed the door shut behind them. Avada blinked. He'd constrained the troll too much and let them escape. Time to rectify that. He ordered the troll to smash the bathroom door down. A troll ignoring the promise of food wasn't in its nature anyway, and besides, a good lesson for those three. Trolls can get into bathrooms. The creature obeyed, battering and smashing around the bathroom door, yet somehow failing to touch a single hair on the three inside. Harry, Ron, and Hermione noticed nothing odd. They hurled bricks, pipes, and anything at the troll, apparently determined to fight rather than flee. Oh, right, the troll was blocking the exit. They couldn't leave. Avada attempted to guide the troll aside so they could escape, but in the boys' panic, the troll seemed enraged and moved menacingly toward Ron, who was pressed against the wall. "No!" Harry cried, and then, in a reckless, sudden move, he leapt forward, wrapped his arms around the troll's neck, and shoved his wand straight up one of its nostrils, an absurdly bold tactic, as if a gargantuar and an imp zombie had just teamed up. Pain surged through the troll's mind so sharp it almost snapped Avada's control. He squeezed more mental power into the Imperio and painfully regained command. Those three were his personal undoing. Ron managed a levitation charm that sent the club flying up to slam into the troll's forehead. It was enough to knock the creature out. Avada released the Imperio. The spell left almost no trace when lifted, which was why so many Death Eaters had escaped prosecution by claiming they'd been under it. He melted away before the professors arrived, relieved. He stopped on the second floor to use the restroom, then drifted back toward the Great Hall entrance. The hall was oddly empty. He paused to compose himself before returning to the Hufflepuff common room to play his part. "What's going on?" he asked, pushing through the common room door. "Why are you all back? I only went to mix an invigoration potion and use the loo, and when I came back to the Great Hall, everyone was gone. Merlin, you wouldn't believe it. There was a troll just now." "I will be loyal to you. I will be loyal to you. Knock, knock, knock. Who is it?" "Professor Quirrell. It's me, Ken." "Ah, Ken, come in." The muffled voice behind the door faded, and the door to the Defense Against the Dark Arts office clicked open. Avada stepped inside. "You should have told me you were coming, Professor," he said. Quirrell closed the door behind him with a half-hearted, half-fearful complaint. As always, the sensation of occlumency being probed slid across his mind, only a light intrusion this time. After the troll attack, everyone had retreated to their common rooms. Once they heard the troll had been dealt with, the feast resumed. Only the youngest students were still nervous. Trolls were at the low end of the spectrum for dangerous magical creatures. Any competent fourth year could handle one. For masters like McGonagall or Flitwick, a troll was less threatening than an owl losing a few feathers at breakfast. The whole school had calmed quickly. Avada had left the Hufflepuff common room as soon as the feast ended and gone up to the third floor to knock on the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. "Is there a problem?" "It was just a troll. Weren't you more than capable of handling that?" The voice that spoke sounded amused. Quirrell, or the voice using his body, had already slipped into Ken's thoughts with a smooth, invasive legitimacy. "But there was a first year there. She almost died," Avada protested, agitated. "I can't imagine how terrible it would be if a student were killed at school by a troll that appeared out of nowhere." His tone shook with fear and indignation. "How terrible could it be?" the professor asked, as if puzzled by Avada's alarm. There was no real concern in the voice, only a deliberately gentle indulgence. "I looked into it. It was only a mudblood, and she wasn't injured. What's the fuss?" Avada flushed with anger. For the first time in front of the professor, he let his displeasure show. "A student dying at school would bring the ministry down on us. The headmaster would be suspended for investigation, the school could be shut down, everyone sent home, and I'd be sent back to that wretched orphanage. I don't want to go back. I want to stay at Hogwarts all summer. This is where I belong. I'm not meant to spend my days with muggles being treated like a freak. A deep, genuine laugh came from Quirrell's throat. You consider Hogwarts your home? You want to stay here forever? Of course, Avada said. Then, would you ever consider teaching here? Becoming a professor yourself if the chance came? I couldn't imagine a better future. You are luckier than I was, the voice sighed. Lucky? Our lives are nearly the same. Ken, an orphanage upbringing, being shunned, being taken in by Dumbledore, having talent, loving Hogwarts. The difference is your name. You were born with it, a name the weak fear and the strong respect. Mine took time to make. Avada looked puzzled. Professor Quirrell was a Ravenclaw, wasn't he? How did you become Slytherin? Do you also have a special name? A secretive smile curved the professor's mouth. I think you may have misunderstood something, Ken. The man who has been teaching you in this office, the one who gives you knowledge you can't learn from textbooks, has never been Professor Quirrell. Avada's eyes widened. It is my pleasure to show you my true face and my true name. Quirrell stood, turned his back to Avada, then reached up slowly and unwrapped his turban. On the back of his head was a pale, unmistakable face, a thin, sinister smile. I am Lord Voldemort. Avada's face drained of color. He stumbled back off his chair and sat on the floor, staring at the horrid sight, paralyzed by the revelation. Master, are you really going to show yourself like this? Aren't you afraid? Silence, Quirrell. The thin voice snapped the name away. Then, speaking directly to Avada in a calm, persuasive tone, Lord Voldemort continued. Yes. The one who has been instructing you is the Dark Lord the whole wizarding world fears, the man Dumbledore most dreads. Professor, Dark Lord, Avada stammered. Continue to call me Professor, Voldemort instructed, but he did not press. Yes, Professor. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you? Avada's question trailed off. Are you trying to say dead? Voldemort sneered. I am not dead, Ken. I have walked further down the path to immortality than anyone. 11 years ago, I suffered a cowardly ambush. They thought they had destroyed me. They were wrong, though it left me diminished, this form. Even so, Dumbledore still fears me. He will stop at nothing to unmake me. Avada's face went pale again. You don't understand the old man's true nature. Insidious, deceitful, a master manipulator. If Dumbledore learned you had been taught by me, or that I had released that troll, he would not hesitate to throw you into Azkaban or worse. He hates and fears anything connected to me. He wants to destroy it all. Avada tried to speak, fear tangling his words. But Voldemort's tone softened, almost coaxing. You need not worry. Dumbledore does not know I am back. I have returned to reclaim something that will restore my body. Once I have a body again, Dumbledore will be nothing to me. And you will be free to study under me. When I control Hogwarts and become headmaster, I will reward you, honor, power, and even the secrets of my immortality. Then you and I can openly bring our great plans to life. He paused and offered the invitation plainly. So, Ken, will you follow me? Will you become my Death Eater? Voldemort's smile was confident. He had already read the answer in Avada's mind. Avada's own voice trembled. Do I have the qualifications, Professor? I heard the Slytherins say Death Eaters are. Of course you do. You will surpass most who serve me. Voldemort said smoothly, I believe in your future. Avada stood, his face resolute despite the fear. Then there is only one answer. He knelt, or rather stood back up, and met Lord Voldemort's eyes. I am willing to pledge my loyalty to you. Then roll up the sleeve of your right arm. Voldemort barely contained his triumph. Controlling Quirrell's body, he picked up his wand and touched Avada's upper right arm. Avada felt a sharp prick and then saw a faint, skull-shaped mark surrounded by a coiled snake bloom on his skin, the dark mark. Inside Avada's head, his thoughts spun faster than his outward composure. All right, the trust level is maxed out now. If he still fails after this, he may as well eat a rock cake and bash his head in. I'll study that mark later and figure out how it works, and then erase it after Voldemort is dealt with. Good. Go back. I look forward to the day you grow and serve me, Voldemort said as he rewrapped Quirrell's turban. Quirrell's body stepped forward to see Avada out, smiling the smile Quirrell had worn so often, but the voice behind it was pleased and calculating. Were you worried the boy might betray me? Voldemort asked quietly. I never meant to doubt you, Master, but you did not see what I saw in his mind, Voldemort said softly. Unparalleled excitement, joy, anticipation, and loyalty. Avada, his pledge given, and the dark mark seared into his skin, wasted no time. He slipped a disillusionment charm over himself with practiced ease and ran like the wind up to the 8th floor, arriving in front of the stone gargoyle that guarded the headmaster's office. 64. Conversation with Dumbledore. Few Avada had dispelled his disillusionment charm by the time he reached the 8th floor. He panted in front of the stone gargoyle, his robes damp with sweat. Oh my God, that was close. Fooling the once mighty Dark Lord with occlumency had felt like walking a tightrope over a cliff. Every step required extreme care. Every tiny mental tremor had to be disguised. Control of facial expressions and micro-movements became a detail within details. In the end, his occlumency and acting held, he'd won Voldemort's trust. Absolute trust, of course, was impossible. Voldemort trusted only himself and regarded his servants as tools. Avada wiped the cold sweat from his brow and approached the gargoyle. Hesitantly, he said, "Fizzing whizbees." The gargoyle didn't move. "Lemonade? Cockroach clusters? Chocolate frogs? Butterbeer? Peppermint ice cream? Stop guessing." The stone creature rolled its eyes. "This one is an imported sweet. The name is an obscure Italian word." Avada froze for a beat. "Right, I'll go ask another professor." He turned to the door of the Ravenclaw common room. Professor Flitwick's office was on the same floor as the headmaster's. "Wait," the gargoyle called after him, oddly hesitant. "Dumbledore has allowed you to enter." It hopped aside, and the section of wall behind it swung open to reveal a winding staircase. Dumbledore had known he was coming? Avada's skin prickled. He tried to recall whether he'd let anything show. Every time he'd been near the troll, every time he'd cast Imperius on it, he'd kept his senses focused on his surroundings and had detected no other life or thought. He'd gone past the portraits under disillusionment. Still, the headmaster had known. He climbed the spiral staircase and arrived at a wooden door. He knocked. "Come in," said an old gentle voice. Avada inhaled, turned the knob, and stepped into the headmaster's office for the first time since arriving at Hogwarts. The room was round and spacious, alive with small, comical noises. Slender-legged tables near the door held a collection of silver instruments that spun and puffed little plumes of smoke. Portraits of former headmasters lined the walls, some snoring softly in their frames. It was hard to tell whether they were asleep or merely pretending. A large table with clawed feet filled the center of the room. On a shelf behind it sat a tattered, wrinkled wizard's hat, the sorting hat. And on a nearby perch, a magnificent crimson bird watched him. Fawkes, the phoenix Avada had seen before. He found himself stealing another glance at Fawkes. After the talent training and the broadening of his magical knowledge, Fawkes's life force and consciousness were, for the first time, faintly traceable through Avada's magic senses. It was strange, a little unnerving, but still progress. "Doesn't Fawkes look a bit younger?" he blurted. Dumbledore pushed up his half-moon spectacles and smiled. "After you and I went to the ministry last year, he underwent another rebirth. A phoenix's life cycle is a kind of self-reset." Avada realized he'd been staring and nearly laughed at himself. He'd come for an important reason and hadn't mentioned it yet. He didn't blurt out Voldemort's name straight away, but asked instead, "Professor, how did you know I was coming?" Dumbledore chuckled. "Not only that, I knew why." "You knew?" Avada's eyes narrowed. Had the headmaster been using legilimency? He almost reflexively reached for his occlumency, then relaxed. Dumbledore's manner gave no sign of intrusive magic. "It's about Professor Quirrell, isn't it?" "You spend rather a lot of time with Quirrell lately," Dumbledore said. "Every weekend you've been in his office for an hour or more. As headmaster, I notice such things." He smiled at Avada's startled expression. "And Quirrell has been behaving oddly. You, on the other hand, are gifted. For a bright young man, certain oddities can be very appealing, so I have been watching." Avada's face went blank. He'd forgotten the headmaster could track students through the endless portraits and watchful eyes of the castle. Tutoring a defense against the dark arts professor every weekend looked like ordinary teaching. Embarrassed, he said, "It's not just Quirrell, Professor. It's me, the troll today. I may have been the one who released it." "Go on," Dumbledore urged. Avada told him, stumbling through the story but honest about every detail he could bear, omitting only the part where he'd been placed under Imperius. He described Quirrell handing him a small box the previous afternoon and asking him to put it in the underground classroom during the Halloween feast as a surprise. On his way back to the dormitory to brew an invigoration potion, Avada had remembered and taken a detour to leave the box. Later, when the troll attacked the classroom, his first thought had been that box. He'd gone to Quirrell's office to confront him, and Quirrell had removed his turban, revealing the pale face on the back of his head. That face called itself Lord Voldemort, Avada finished, hand trembling. Dumbledore's brows lifted. So that is how he's infiltrated. You knew? Avada asked. Of course, Dumbledore said. I have been trying to learn where he hides. I did not expect you would be the first to discover him. Then why didn't you? Avada began. Dumbledore smiled faintly. I have my plans, and I am capable of preventing him from harming anyone. Do not underestimate the wisdom of old men, Ken. His smile faded. His voice turned serious. If I'm not mistaken, after revealing himself, he threatened you. He told you I was wicked, that if he learned you had been studying with him and followed his instructions, if I found out, you would be expelled or imprisoned in Azkaban, or worse. That's right, Avada said. But you still came to me, Dumbledore said, softer now. That took courage. Not everyone can stay rational under Voldemort's persuasion. Your trust gives me very important information. Perhaps your trust can change many things. Avada said nothing. He felt foolishly shy about how little he'd trusted his own courage until forced to. Dumbledore's look warmed with gratitude. I have another request. What is it, Professor? I must ask you to pretend nothing has happened. Continue seeing Quirrell as before. Do not let him see anything amiss. Dumbledore hesitated, then added, I know it is improper to involve a student in matters with such a dangerous wizard, but we have little choice at present. Avada nodded slowly. If I act differently after tonight, he'll suspect I told you. He wouldn't hesitate. He'd kill me and flee Hogwarts. You will continue to attend his classes to appear to submit, Dumbledore said. Do not reveal any weakness. Very well. Avada met the headmaster's eyes. Thank you. Dumbledore rose and fixed him with a solemn look. Thank you for trusting me. To show my thanks, I will award Hufflepuff 30 points. He sat again, the smile returning to his eyes. And be reassured, no one will blame you for the troll incident. In this, you are a victim. He looked at the clock. It's nearly curfew. If you delay, Filch will catch you and I'll have to explain. Would you like some sweets? They're imported from Italy. They're quite good. At no point did Dumbledore press Avada on why he had attracted Lord Voldemort's interest, nor why Voldemort had shown his true face to him so readily. Those questions hung unasked as Avada left, the headmaster's offer of help a small, steady light against the dark knowledge he now carried. 65. The correct way to open a seeker. Avada was quietly grateful that Dumbledore hadn't pressed him for details. If the headmaster had dug deeper, there were too many questions he couldn't answer. How could a second year make Lord Voldemort, whom not even the Philosopher's Stone had tempted out, appear? Why did Voldemort trust him so readily? Why were there no limits placed on him? And most bewildering, Dumbledore had never even attempted the shallowest legilimency. Out of respect for that unasked-for trust, Avada felt compelled to finish the magic that restrained the wandering spirit and to present Dumbledore with an impressive result. In practice, Avada had slid smoothly into the role Snape had left, inheriting his mantle, keeping regular contact with Voldemort for the coming week and more. With the dark mark now on him, Voldemort had no further need to find intermediaries. Whenever the mark burned, Avada only had to go to the Defense Against the Dark Arts office and be there. After Avada released the troll and formally pledged allegiance, at which point their rapport deepened, Voldemort also began teaching him more advanced, secret techniques of mental magic, answering his difficulties with psychodynamic analysis. The combination of instruction and access dramatically accelerated Avada's progress in dissecting Voldemort's mental powers. He felt he was close to a full understanding. The dark mark itself yielded another unexpected breakthrough. Avada managed to decipher why the mark synchronized instantly across any distance. That insight sharpened his grasp of space and spirit, and it sparked ideas for combining apparition with the undetectable extension charm. He needed to move fast. If he waited long, it would become awkward to act on Voldemort without arousing suspicion. It was mid-November. The troll incident ought to have faded into history, but rumors had amplified it. People whispered that the savior had single-handedly taken down a troll in his first year. The chatter only reinforced the notion that Harry Potter was innately powerful, that his earlier quietness had been a deliberate concealment of potential. Once stirred, he could sweep everything aside. Avada half-suspected someone at the Ministry had planted stories at Hogwarts. All that talk was diluted, however, by another event: Quidditch. No one at school had actually seen Harry play because Wood kept things tightly controlled, but everyone knew he had been drafted as the youngest Seeker ever. Talk about this year's match exploded. Wanting to give his friends a fair chance, Avada had, with Harry's permission, told Baron, Cedric, and Cho that Harry had a Nimbus 2000. Baron figured that because he and the others were older and had practiced longer, a Nimbus could only partially close the gap. He declined to bring out his own broom from home, a relief to Cedric and Cho. Avada promised he would unleash his resources mercilessly next year. Finally, the match began. Avada was glad to leave behind the tangle of spells and mental work for a few hours and simply watch the game. Fortunately, Voldemort hadn't assigned him any task to tamper with Harry's broom. As tradition dictated, the first match was the fiercest: Gryffindor versus Slytherin. 14 players took their positions in 2 lines, glaring at one another, while Madame Hooch stood between them reading the rules, though few were listening. In the commentary box sat Lee Jordan, a third-year Gryffindor, monitored by Professor McGonagall to keep him impartial and serious. "Please mount your brooms," Hooch called. Harry settled onto his Nimbus 2000 and looked across at Baron on a shooting star. They exchanged a brief nod. Madame Hooch blew her silver whistle. 15 brooms shot up into the air, and the match was underway. Harry immediately climbed to a high altitude well above the melee and cruised slowly around the pitch, eyes narrowed for any flash of gold. Baron took a different approach. He patrolled inside the confrontation zone, hunting the snitch at close quarters, paying little heed to the bludgers or opposing players because his teammates were covering that for him. It was riskier. He was easier to knock down, but it let him spot the snitch sooner and use feints to confuse the opposing seeker. As the teams traded a few goals, Baron was the first to pick up a trace of the snitch. He pushed his broom to full power and shot after it. Harry hesitated for a heartbeat, thrown by the earlier feints. Only when he saw the snitch's wake did he dive down. Both sides redoubled their efforts to block the rival seeker. The confrontation intensified. The Nimbus 2000 proved its worth. Harry quickly overtook Baron, closing in on the snitch. "Watch out," someone shouted. A bludger from Slytherin streaked toward Harry, and he yanked up hard, narrowly avoiding it, but that momentary maneuver let Baron slip past again. "Sorry I didn't intercept it well," shouted Fred Weasley as he sped by, bat raised. He feigned out a Slytherin chaser, then used the opening to smash a bludger toward Baron. "But I can still even it up." "Dream on." Marcus, captain and Baron's protector, cried, intercepting Fred's bludger and redirecting it toward Angelina, a Slytherin chaser trying to break through, throwing their quaffle off course. Baron closed in on the snitch, almost within reach. Another bludger screamed in from below and grazed the tail bristles of Baron's broom. He wrenched for balance, spun wildly, then righted himself, but in that instant, the snitch vanished. "It's George!" Lee Jordan bellowed from the commentary box, breathless. He just used an incredibly risky low-altitude maneuver to dodge everything and somehow intercepted the Slytherin seeker from the ground. "Baron's broom is unsteady. Will he be knocked off? Oh, he's back up. What a shame." "Jordan." Professor McGonagall's sharp look sent him into a coughing apology, and he resumed his commentary in a more respectable tone. "Not so easy to win, eh?" George Weasley whooped as he whooshed past Baron and turned to high-five Fred. Baron rolled his eyes, checked his broom, and resumed weaving through the chaos, searching carefully for any trace of the snitch. 66, Nimbus Corporation, thrills. Looks like this is going to be interesting. Avada, sitting in the stands, raised an eyebrow. He had finally grasped the Seeker's true role. This position turned Quidditch into a two-phase game. While the snitch was fast and unattainable, it was a straightforward contest of chasers and beaters. Once the snitch slowed and became catchable, the match switched modes. Teams began to interfere with the opposing seeker and to protect their own. Catching the golden snitch was never purely a seeker's solo feat. It required the whole team's cooperation. The two phases alternated, and tactics from each could bleed into the other, creating far richer strategic choices. That, Avada thought, was the real excitement of Quidditch, provided both teams actually followed the rules. Last year's match had been a mess, fouls all over, and once the snitch slowed, the seekers and the rest of the players were split into two separate battlefields and barely interacted. That had given him the impression that the seeker didn't need to engage. The ridiculously lenient punishment for fouls was still a problem, but this game was different. Gryffindor and Slytherin were uncharacteristically clean, perhaps out of respect for the chosen one, or because Baron's presence cooled the animosity a bit. Whatever the reason, with rules being observed and no separate play zones, the match had real spark. Even Avada felt a thrill. After the snitch vanished briefly, play returned to the first phase. Chasers and beaters of both sides resumed their fierce battle. Baron continued to cruise the pitch looking for the snitch, and Harry stayed high in the air, scanning the field. Suddenly, Harry's broom shuddered. The shaking intensified until it threatened to throw him off. The Nimbus 2000 lurched and began to twist and buck wildly, pulling him away from the field and climbing higher and higher. "My broom's gone," he yelled, but he was too high and too far away. Nobody down below heard him. All eyes were on the game. Voldemort's made his move, Avada thought, frowning. He glanced past the field to where Quirrell and Snape sat in the stands and saw both men had their heads tilted up, staring at Harry's broom and muttering under their breath. "Where's Hermione? Where's Hermione? Do something!" Avada fretted, scanning the Gryffindor stand. Hermione was frowning and sweeping her gaze over the crowd, still trying to pinpoint Snape's location, and Harry's broom looked like it might not hold together another second. Player Baron seems to have stopped cruising, his broom slowing down. What's he up to? Lee Jordan's voice crackled over the loudspeakers with his usual enthusiasm. He'd noticed Baron make an odd move. He flew in front of Madame Hooch. Does he need a pit stop? Wait, he's pointing up to the sky. Let's see. Harry, what's happening? Harry's broom appears to be malfunctioning. Thank Merlin. Baron spotted it and alerted the ref. Madame Hooch is ascending to Harry for emergency assistance. As expected of Baron, Avada murmured. Baron had been using feints to distract Harry while searching for the snitch, so he'd been watching Harry's every move. Amid the general chaos of the first phase, perhaps only the other seeker could focus on a fellow seeker. Meanwhile, Hermione finally shoved Quirrell aside, and with a discreet flick, set Snape's robe alight enough to draw his attention away. In the confusion, Harry's broom slowly steadied. Wait, Avada thought. With the commentator pointing it out, everyone in the stadium knows the broom malfunctioned now. Imagine the Cleansweeps Company's PR disaster. Their latest flagship nearly caused the savior to fall to his death. He silently mourned the reputation of the broommakers. Once this is over, I'll talk to Baron and get Mr. Shafake to discuss a public statement with Dumbledore. Otherwise, the company's share value, assuming the magical world even has a stock market, could tank. He shook his head and refocused on the match. Harry, having steadied himself, suddenly tipped his broom and dove almost straight down. Baron was already heading for the same spot, a hair ahead. Both seekers have the snitch in sight, Lee cried, but it's much lower now, almost grazing the ground. Baron has the distance advantage and is closest, while Harry's a little behind. Baron is slowing. He doesn't want his broom to slam into the turf. He's angling for a smoother approach. Slytherin's trying to block the diving Harry, but they're held off by Fred and George. Brilliant. Harry has overtaken the already slowed Baron. He's very low, but he's not easing off, still diving at full speed. What a pull-up. He made a near 90-degree turn, less than 2 meters off the ground. Merlin above. What extraordinary control. And the Nimbus 2000 really is a remarkable broom. If it were anything else, it would have snapped. His broom touched the ground. He's pressing a hand to his mouth. Looks like he's feeling sick. Wait, what's in his hand? It's the golden snitch. He caught it. Score, 170-50. Gryffindor wins. A roar from the Gryffindor stands threatened to tear the roof off. The match ended amid chaos and celebration, and with a small piece of school history. Not a single foul had been committed by either Gryffindor or Slytherin, and the Slytherin Seeker had even helped the Gryffindor Seeker. It was the sort of thing worth recording. "Thanks," Harry said earnestly as he flew over to Baron before leaving the pitch, having run back to thank him after hearing from his teammates. He sighed. "If all Slytherins were like you, that would be something." Baron silently rolled his eyes. He'd saved Harry's life, and the boy's gratitude came with an insult to House Slytherin. Still, he smiled and complimented Harry's near 90-degree pull-up a few times. Privately, he vowed to get a better broom next year and use it to give this kid a good run for his money. With that, he left the pitch with the still slightly indignant Slytherins, while Harry celebrated with his teammates and then returned to his friends. "It was Snape," Ron blurted to Harry and Hagrid. "Hermione and I both saw him. He was muttering a spell at your broom, his eyes fixed on you." "Hogwash," Hagrid said, shaking his head. He sounded more than a little scornful. Why would Snape do such a thing? Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged glances, unsure how much to say. Harry took a breath and decided to tell the truth. "I found out a few things about him," he said. "On Halloween, Snape tried to get through the passage guarded by that three-headed dog and ended up getting his leg bitten. We reckon he was trying to steal whatever that dog was guarding." Hagrid, 67. The curse of so close to the end of the world. No matter how Harry and his friends had come to suspect Snape or how they had pried the name Nicholas Flamel out of Hagrid, the school Quidditch match continued. Hufflepuff faced Ravenclaw, two teams that, unlike Gryffindor and Slytherin, committed far fewer fouls. That made the game less thrilling, but something peculiar happened that year. The Seekers of both teams openly handed out dog food to every teacher and student during their chase. On the field, when the golden snitch finally slowed and appeared, Cedric and Cho flew side by side, showing no intention of colliding or blocking each other. Led by the snitch, they traced graceful arcs, like two butterflies on the pitch, and together they drifted toward the sunset. The other players simply halted their interceptions and stood in place, munching melon. In the end, Cedric, with his longer reach and an extra year of training, caught the snitch. Hufflepuff's honor was safe. Avada almost gouged his own eyes out afterward, regardless of what that would look like to others. Then he thought of his magic senses. Even if he blinded himself, he would still perceive spiritual power and thus be subjected to more dog food, so he reluctantly abandoned the idea. To properly cleanse his eyes and his mind, he resolved to throw himself into research for the foreseeable future. If things went well, his spatial magic was about to bear fruit. So he sat in an empty classroom in the castle and began. With a series of faint pops, Avada appeared from one end of the room to the other, grinning despite himself. He had broken Hogwarts' anti-apparition jinx. The reason for his smile was that the jinx's principle was far sillier than he'd expected. It was merely designed to block the passage of spiritual power. To apparat, one must use a meditation technique that lets the caster's spiritual power penetrate space in a supergeometric way, lock onto the destination, and open a passage in the spatial structure for instantaneous transportation. If you place a jinx that prevents spiritual power from passing through a protected location, apparition can be stopped because the destination can't be locked onto. In short, Hogwarts' anti-apparition jinx didn't reinforce space at all. It simply blocked spiritual signatures. Even more amusingly, it only affected the spiritual structures of humanoid beings: humans, giants and half-giants, goblins, centaurs. Creatures with different kinds of apparition were completely unaffected. That explained why house elves and phoenixes shrugged off jinxes like sieves. Once he understood that, Avada knew he only needed to alter the frequency of his spiritual power to slip past the jinx. It wasn't easy. He spent days experimenting and finally had to rely on a small alchemical aid and a complex meditation method. The materials weren't expensive, less than 7 galleons worth from Diagon Alley, and the result was a watch-sized, lens-like device. By using the meditation technique while gazing through it, he could tune his spiritual frequency and, like a house elf, drill through any human-set anti-apparition jinx. He kept the discovery to himself for now, Not until he had a way to truly reinforce space would he show anyone. But that was only the bonus. His real achievement lay elsewhere. He calmed himself, suppressed his excitement, and slowly raised his wand. He cast a bubble head charm over himself, then dragged his wand down. The bubble that had only covered his head expanded down, enveloping his entire body like a transparent raincoat. Good. Strength is sufficient. Now, he waved his wand in a peculiar rhythm, brow furrowed, and murmured an incantation. Jichi, Tianya. In an instant, Avada Kedavra vanished from the classroom as silently as a breath. He found himself in a peculiar realm, absolute darkness like the void of space, yet his magic senses still registered the structures of objects in the empty room, anchoring his perception to the outside world. The full-body bubble-head charm clung to him with no problem, leaving a thin gap between him and the outside. He tried to step forward, but his legs passed through the floor as if it were mist. He floated, unable to touch anything. So cold, he hissed. Thank heavens I prepared warming measures. There was no light here. He could only see by feeling outwards with his magic. He had succeeded in casting an undetectable extension charm on the spatial passage with his spiritual power, and, after verifying there were no immediate dangers, eased his body inside. Through the course of his research, Avada realized his earlier approach had been wrong. He didn't need to cast Apparition and the undetectable extension charm separately. He could merge them, use spiritual power to penetrate space without locking onto a destination, but let that same spiritual power act as an extension of his body so he could cast the undetectable extension charm on the passage itself. The result was a small nested space, a pocket cave inside the original space. It was, in effect, Apparition without the apparent arrival. The body remained stuck inside the spatial pocket while he gradually expanded its interior with the extension charm, escaping the three realms outside. Even with killing curses raining from without, they would not touch him. Because the pocket would lack light, heat, and air, he had protected his body first. The bubblehead charm, in the hands of a powerful wizard, could withstand the pressure at great depths. While he hadn't pushed it that far, it was more than enough to keep internal pressure and supply a little air. Without those precautions, plunging his body into that space would have been akin to a suicide breath into the void. Once I can cast this at will, it'll be my trump card, he thought, the novelty giving way to a thrill that made his skin prickle. A portable, movable safe house. Hide inside and not even Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and Voldemort together could touch me. As long as the air and heat hold out, I can stay forever, and when I want, I can finish the apparition and go anywhere, regardless of jinxes. And if I master movement within this pocket, flying in thin air, I can move freely inside it and go through real-world obstacles. He smiled to himself, a cold, exuberant smile. Am I invincible? Chapter 68, The Mystery of the Confession Effect. Developing the magic of flight out of thin air shouldn't be difficult. After all, Lord Voldemort and Snape both managed it in the original work. For Avada, who already had magical senses, it should be even easier. He had plenty of ideas. He just hadn't tested them yet. Besides, this avoided the need to painstakingly develop perfect optical invisibility. The Jichi Tianya curse could make him vanish into thin air. What use was ordinary visual invisibility when he could disappear completely? Even if he needed to manipulate physical objects while hidden, the Jichi Tianya curse didn't make the pop of apparition, and combined with a skilled disillusionment charm, it would be perfectly sufficient. And Harry's invisibility cloak should be arriving soon, he thought. When it does, I can analyze it and find out what the Deathly Hallows are really about. He couldn't move freely inside the spatial interlayer yet, so he had come to the empty classroom on the 8th floor, only to test that apparition restriction. After confirming that spellcasting worked normally within the interlayer, he returned to reality and headed for the room of requirement. The real work would have to be done in its private space. Recent research had been straightforward. Besides the crucial task of deciphering Lord Voldemort's mental power, he'd been studying spatial magic and trying to make sense of Professor Baker's large book. With Voldemort absent and spatial magic advancing, he could finally turn his attention back to that uncomfortable volume. Chapter 6. Research Notes on the Soul's Confession Effect. Confession effect. Avada raised an eyebrow. Was this related to the confession magic Professor Baker had left behind last year? He began to read carefully. In previous Horcrux research, I confirmed that souls have volume. Whether they have mass remains unknown. But that isn't my subject today. The author of the note seemed to be the same person as the writer of the second and third notes. The fourth and fifth entries recorded detailed data from a dark wizard's experiments on vitality and mental power. The mental power work overlapped heavily with things Avada already knew, while the vitality research yielded valuable new insights. And in the course of gathering Horcrux material, the author had noticed a recurring claim. Many sources mentioned something called the confession effect. According to them, if a Horcrux creator sincerely repents the evil act of murder committed to make the Horcrux, sincerely, from the heart, then the soul fragment can return and the whole soul is restored. At first I scoffed. I already knew it wasn't the evil murder that split the soul, but the sudden descent of the deathly power that tore a piece away. If someone used deathly power for what they considered a righteous killing, self-defense, revenge, then would they have to repent for their righteous act to be reunited with their soul? Besides, Horcruxes can be destroyed, and when a Horcrux is destroyed, the unprotected fragment should be seized by deathly power. Confession? Can confession really move death to pity and return fragments that have already been taken? But so many Horcrux texts mentioned it, and several Horcrux creators claimed to have tried it successfully. I had no choice but to take this absurdity seriously. The first problem was finding powerful dark wizards who could make Horcruxes and then forcing them to sincerely repent. After 2 years of work, I improved the Horcrux creation method, simplifying precision and complexity so that any reasonably powerful dark wizard could reach the threshold. Who would refuse immortality? I intentionally left the evil murder restriction in place for later study. Then, I spent another year traveling worldwide, finding clumsy dark wizards, gaining their trust, and teaching them my method. I obtained 35 Horcrux samples, a disappointingly small number, but I was impatient to probe the soul's mysteries. I consulted priests' methods for guiding confession and the tangled moral philosophies of good and evil, but I still couldn't make someone who had created a Horcrux repent. I suspect even the Pope wouldn't have succeeded. So I burned those books that had tormented me for months and started experimenting on my own. I altered the memory of the first sample, making him believe he'd created the Horcrux only to survive a terminal illness. Useless. His personality didn't change. He insisted that pursuing life was natural and said he would have made a Horcrux even if he'd been healthy. This was the first time in my life I killed someone out of anger at another's evil. If this gets out, dark wizards worldwide will laugh at me for centuries. But the experiment had to continue. For the second sample, I used a full memory charm, wiping him to a blank slate, then sent him to a small village with a seemingly pleasant atmosphere so that he'd at least believe murder was a crime. I fabricated evidence, framing him for a nasty Muggle murder from years ago, and guided detectives to him. When he learned the truth, he was shocked and disbelieving, still no confession. Makes sense. He didn't even remember killing anyone, so how could he repent? I really wanted to send those damned men off with a single blasting curse, but to avoid entanglement with the ministry, I restrained myself. Merlin above, the 30-second sample finally confessed. Honestly, if this one hadn't worked, I might have considered repenting myself. Repenting why I'd made Horcruxes for immortality only to be tormented by these wretches. Back to the point. While he repented, I monitored his soul and the Horcrux with the methods I'd designed. Then the most astonishing thing happened, visible in my instruments and numbers. His soul truly became whole again. The soul fragment in the Horcrux vanished. As I continued, my worldview was overturned. I destroyed the next sample's Horcrux, guided him to confession the same way, and his soul was made whole again. Why? Did the middle road collapse just like that? Avada stood before the book, staring at the warped "why" written in the margin, and fell completely silent. Confession was clearly a manifestation of spiritual power, so how could it restore a torn soul to wholeness? And worse, how could confession work even after a soul's fragments had been pulled away by deathly power? What was a soul, really? Where did it come from? Why did it have such an intimate link to confession? Did a force called death truly exist in the world, shepherding and judging every soul? No, he forced himself not to think about it any further, or he'd end up like Newton. He shook his head hard, inhaled to steady his racing thoughts, and returned to the terrifying notes. Calm down. There must be a deeper reason. If deathly power is the cause of soul splitting, then the healing effect of confession must have its own rationale. I need to design experiments to uncover it. Failure. Failure. Still failure. I'm at my wit's end, he admitted aloud. Unless I kill myself and let my own soul see the afterlife firsthand, I probably won't learn the secret of the soul and confession in this life. But I can't give up. As long as I still have the means to explore, I will press on. Human eyes may not be able to look upon the divine directly, but I will record everything humanity can observe. If I can't determine the principle of confession, at least I can gather data. Perhaps a brilliant successor will find a hint of the truth in what I collect. He flipped further through the pages. Thanks to the chaos Grindelwald caused, I've obtained a large number of dark wizard samples over the past years, some simply foolish, some inexperienced. I merely had to entice them into creating Horcruxes, then seize the wizards and their Horcruxes for study. The sample pool swelled to over 100, many of them with multiple Horcruxes. Although I always thought Grindelwald should have focused less on grandeur and more on actual wizarding practice, sometimes progress in magic does rely on unfortunate external circumstances. I did gain something unexpected. My understanding of soul volume deepened. By observing the spiritual power changes during confession and recreating that structure with natural magic, I developed a charm that can mimic some effects of confession, forcing a main soul and its fragments back together. It's imperfect. It doesn't truly restore a soul, but it's a start. Perhaps a successor can refine it and achieve true soul healing through external means. That would be a major breakthrough. I've also recorded the fusion effects produced when fragments of different volumes are merged with a main soul under this charm. Hopefully those records will help future researchers. Dense charts followed for several pages. Then a few lines of a familiar hand caught his eye, Professor Baker's annotation. This article is one of the sources for my own confession magic. I called it incomplete because the problems it raises were unresolved. After reading it, you may marvel at the profundity of the soul and admire the author's dedication. To be honest, I hesitated over whether to spare his life. He killed far more dark wizards than he did innocents. In the end, I killed him. He was an unforgivable dark wizard. For his experiments, he murdered at least dozens of innocents over time and actively led many unwitting people into evil. My reminder to you is this. In the pursuit of knowledge, do not forget that all magic and technology should revolve around life. Life is the ultimate purpose of everything. Do not lose your way chasing truth and forget to respect life. Of course, I believe you will heed this. You were chosen for Hufflepuff. I would not have given you these materials otherwise. I wish you well. Avada breathed out. I will. He had let himself get swept up in that strange phenomenon earlier. Even now, while reading accounts of the horrifying processes, most of his thoughts had been trying to figure out whether the author had discovered the secret of confession. Only then did the cost of those experiments return to him. The 100 samples who were required to make Horcruxes meant 100 innocents murdered. The article's pages became as heavy and stained as the first time he'd read them. A nagging doubt remained. A man who had kept himself alive with Horcruxes for an unknown span of years, improved the Horcrux-making method, possessed deep insight into the nature of life, could sneer at Grindelwald, and had captured hundreds of dark wizards as test subjects. That was a terrifying person. His power must have rivaled Grindelwald's, perhaps even Dumbledore's. To conduct such vast experiments, he must have had a vast force behind him. How had Professor Baker killed someone like that? And if Baker was so powerful, and old enough that his prowess would have been obvious before the rise of Voldemort, why had he not remained in Britain to fight Voldemort, the most dangerous dark wizard of the age? Forget it. These questions could wait. There was something more immediate to confirm. Avada closed the heavy book, took it into his hands, and hurried out of his private room. He paced 3 times outside the room of requirement, then opened the compartment for hiding things. Inside, he found Ravenclaw's diadem and studied the magic void where a soul fragment hovered. He reopened the book to the Confession Magic Fusion data record, pulled pen and paper from his robes, and lay on the floor to calculate. When the numbers finally filled the page, his face drained of color. Insufficient volume. Unable to pull? His original plan had been elegant in its cruelty. Use Ravenclaw's diadem, the Horcrux, as the core, set up a confession charm tailored to Lord Voldemort's spiritual signature in the end of the 4th-floor corridor, just as he had last semester. Then, when Quirrell's body was destroyed by the protective charm around Harry and Voldemort reverted to a weak, wandering spirit, activate Confession to draw his main soul into the diadem and seal him completely. But according to the experimental records he'd just read, and based on his calculations of Voldemort's spiritual power and soul metrics, the fragment inside the diadem did not have enough volume to pull Voldemort's main soul across. Instead, the fragment would be drawn back to the main soul. If the data, compiled from hundreds of dark wizards, was correct, then his plan had collapsed halfway through. 70. Christmas holidays are coming. Avada stared at the figures on the page and fell silent. Last semester, Confession Magic had allowed Professor Baker's main soul to return to his body. That outcome hadn't depended on soul quantity alone. It had involved total mental power, the binding strength of Horcruxes, vitality, and how well a soul fit its body. Perhaps that odd black crystal capable of containing a main soul had helped too. But facing Lord Voldemort this time, with his abnormally small main soul, his warped mental power, his quasi-bodiless state, and the diadem's own Horcrux magic, Confession could only pull his soul fragments back toward his main soul. It couldn't heal or strengthen Voldemort's consciousness. At least the Confession charm wasn't area of effect. Otherwise, the fragments inside Harry Potter that night might have been dragged in and everything would have become a mess. Still, those fragments were back in Voldemort's possession. If he recovered his body, he could use the pieces from the diadem to create a new Horcrux without Avada knowing. Tracking that would be a nightmare. Half a year of work had been wasted. Avada felt the sting. He wasn't crushed, though. He had more than one plan. Spike Voldemort's father's ashes with potions, sneak into Azkaban to tamper with Death Eaters, destroy all the Horcruxes he'd managed to gather during Voldemort's battle with Dumbledore. He still had detailed data on Voldemort's mental profile and could design bespoke counterspells to exploit peculiarities in his psyche. Send those to the Order of the Phoenix, and any competent member could apply crushing pressure, sowing doubt in Voldemort's mind. But the fastest, cheapest method had failed, and losing that was hard to swallow. So go it alone. I'm idle anyway. Without Voldemort breathing down my neck, second-year classes are going to be dull. But there's only half a year left. If I can't find a starting point over Christmas, I might be stuck. All I can do is try my best. Sighing, Avada shelved the big book and left the room of requirement. Christmas was next. Quirrell probably wouldn't remain at Hogwarts, so he'd lose access to continued readings of Voldemort's mental power. But he already had enough data that a class or two more could finish the picture. The holiday would be his chance to look for a beginning. He needed to check the restricted section. Fortunately, he'd already researched the Zchitianya curse. Otherwise, slittling past the wards would have been difficult, and he'd found a way to move through the spatial interstice, albeit unconventionally. He felt a strange pull toward Gryffindor lately, as if the house itself was assimilating him. He had no proof, only a sense. That night, he got up in the dark, locked himself in the bathroom, and used the Zchitianya curse to slip into the spatial interstice. He let himself bask for a moment in the absurd pride of pretending to be a floating life Xuanhuang heavenly venerate, then pulled a broomstick from his pocket. It was a Comet 100 sports broom, the oldest model Comet still made, worth 2 galleons and 4 sickles. There was no conjured flight available inside the interstice, but a broom would do. He'd pre-treated it to be cold-resistant so it would function in that near-vacuum environment. Casting an undetectable extension charm to expand the space around him, he rose slowly on the broom, gliding through walls like a ghost while watching the changing weave of magic around him. He reached the fifth-floor restricted section without incident. For good measure, he put a disillusionment charm on himself and began to move among the shelves. The section lived up to its reputation. Books that left odd patterns on your skin if you touched them, volumes that shrieked when opened, others that tried to crawl off the shelf. Many covers were grotesque, hairy, spiky, bubbling as if boiling. Some said even covered in rolling eyeballs. Who knew what twisted imaginations had produced them? Avada's magical senses let him suppress or avoid the worst of the chaos, but after more than half an hour of searching, he came up empty-handed. Sullen, he apparated back to the Hufflepuff bathroom and tiptoed to his dormitory. He didn't want anyone stumbling upon him and assuming he'd been up all night because of digestive trouble. Tomorrow, most students would leave for Christmas. Once the castle emptied, he could spend as much time as he liked in the restricted section without being noticed. Until then, discretion. The next morning, Baron was packing. "You're going home this time?" Avada asked. "Hadn't Baron stayed at Hogwarts last year?" "Of course," Baron said. "Last year I stayed for the novelty. Once that's done, you have to go home or you'll only see your family once a year." Avada remembered the oddness of the previous Christmas and felt a prickle of unease. Baron shrugged. "I'll send an owl with your present. Don't ask. Secret." Avada watched Baron board the Hogwarts Express with luggage in hand and felt a twinge of loneliness. Almost everyone he knew, his roommates Cedric, Cho, Baron, the Weasley twins, had chosen to go home. Only a few students were staying behind. That meant he'd only bump into anyone in the kitchens or while looking for food. He wouldn't dare try the restricted section during the day with so few privacy options. Harry and Ron were staying at Hogwarts, but they were hardly friends. Besides, according to the original timeline, they were still preoccupied with Nicholas Flamel. If Avada wanted help, it wouldn't come from them. He resolved to visit Hagrid if he got bored, and otherwise use the holiday to push his research forward. Back in the dormitory, he prepared Christmas gifts. Nothing too special: homemade pastries, alchemical trinkets, interesting books. For Baron, he made a bottle of wit-sharpening potion he'd finally perfected. It had helped him a great deal last year. He also prepared small gifts for Quirrell, Harry, and Ron. For Quirrell, it was part flattery, part loyalty signaling. For Harry and Ron, it was relationship building. If Harry trusted him, Avada would have an easier time dealing with the soul fragments inside the boy later. He specifically chose a book on alchemy for Harry that highlighted Nicholas Flamel's contributions, including the Philosopher's Stone, useful bait to keep Harry occupied and less likely to meddle in Avada's nighttime explorations. Chapter 71, The Biggest Horse Drop Crisis in History. It was 11 o'clock at night. Avada was alone in the empty dormitory, surrounded by the neatly wrapped Christmas presents he had received. Mostly books, since everyone knew he spent his days buried in research. To his mild surprise, Baron had included an invigoration potion, but a deluxe version brewed by a potion master from top-grade ingredients. Baron's letter claimed it was several times more effective than a standard invigoration potion, lasted longer, and had virtually no side effects. A dream come true for someone stuck in midnight study marathons. Harry had sent him a bag of chocolate shaped like snitches, though Avada had no idea where Harry had gotten them. Lord Voldemort hadn't sent a gift, only a letter praising Avada's loyalty and urging him to work harder. A short distance, yet worlds apart. The final line read. A sudden chill and a feeling of weightlessness washed over him. His vision went black. He produced the broom he kept ready, straddled it, and relied on his magical senses to navigate. In no time, he landed precisely in the restricted section again. He gave himself a disillusionment charm, as he had before, and threaded his way between the stacks. This holiday, I'll just turn into an owl, sleep by day, live in the restricted section by night, he muttered. Between the invigoration potion and the time shift, I'll be fine. He pulled a book from a nearby shelf, Advanced Sealing Techniques Explained, carefully tamped down the book's mundane wards, and began to read. The text ranged across all manner of esoteric and forbidden arts, sealing rituals aimed at life essence, spells that could bind someone to a place forever. He nearly jumped when the chapter heading mentioned a blood curse werewolf. It only mentioned it briefly. Don't scare me like that, he murmured. The table of contents said nothing about the origin of the soul. He wondered how widespread the so-called three-layer soul theory was in high academic circles. If it were only whispered about in small, secretive cliques, he might not find any reliable sources, even in the entire restricted section. Avada settled on the floor, back against the shelf, and read with complete focus. He remembered the Hand of Glory from earlier sources, a charm that made light visible only to its holder. He had come here specifically to find background on that and similar artifacts, and he'd even replicated the magic once, all for nights like this. He turned page after page, hunting for any thread of inspiration. Across the room, Harry crept through the dark tapestry of the library, heart thudding with exhilaration. Cloaked in his invisibility cloak, he felt like the whole castle belonged to him. Filch would never know. He'd come for the restricted section. He could read as much as he wanted until he discovered the truth about Nicholas Flamel. He clutched a lantern, and careful to let only a narrow slit of light escape the cloak, guided himself past rows of ominous, unreadable spines. Some titles were in faded gilt he couldn't decipher. Some books had no title at all. One volume bore a dark, blood-like stain that made his skin prickle. Sometimes he thought he heard faint whispers, as if the books knew an intruder was there. Maybe it was just his imagination. Then he saw a shadow that the lantern could not penetrate. In the center of it, a book floated in midair, open, turning its own pages with a soft, crisp rustle. He pressed a hand to his mouth to keep from gasping, and driven by an impossible curiosity, tiptoed closer. Maybe, he thought, this book knew why he had come. Maybe it had been waiting for him. He slipped a hand from under the cloak toward the book. Holy crap! Avada nearly lost his composure. He had been bent over his book when a disembodied hand suddenly appeared in front of him. When he looked up along that hand, he found a creature beside him, something that looked like a thestral formed of magic, a chaotic, nonsensical structure of light and shadow. It shouldn't have been able to move, yet it was there. The pattern wasn't exactly right for a thestral. Its form was slightly more regular, its construction different, and the mental signature beneath it struck him as oddly familiar and off-kilter. When Avada swore, the thing recoiled and flew several meters away, which was not how a thestral would normally behave. Harry? A voice said. Ken? Another answered. Both froze. Then Harry drew off his invisibility cloak, and Avada dispelled his disillusionment charm. They slumped back on the floor, staring at each other from a few meters apart. Why is Ken here? Harry thought. And why can he be invisible? Does he have his own cloak? Why is this kid here again? Avada thought. Didn't I give him books with detailed information about Nicholas Flamel? Why is he sneaking around like this? The questions stalled in Avada's head when his magic senses flared. Not far behind Harry, a vast, noble presence had appeared almost out of nowhere, colossal and bright, like a star wrapped in a disillusionment charm. From that majestic golden aura came a flicker of surprise, confusion, and a very clear recognition. Dumbledore. Dumbledore had seen him. He had seen Avada slip into the restricted section. He had seen him cast a disillusionment charm. He had seen the Hand of Glory-like magic Avada had been practicing, and he had seen the forbidden volume in Avada's hands. Why would Dumbledore be here? Oh, right, he was the one who'd given Harry the invisibility cloak. In the books, Dumbledore had watched Harry in secret before. Maybe this was the same. What to do? Act now? Fold the hand? Lay the cards out and surrender? How much should he reveal? And with Harry right there, how many options did he even have? 72. No more pretending. I am the new generation Grindelwald. You? How are you here? After a moment of stunned silence, Harry was the first to ask. Avada gave a bitter smile. What he was about to say wasn't just for Harry's benefit, it was also meant for Dumbledore. Going into the restricted section alone, handling dark arts books, having contact with Lord Voldemort, not even possessing Quirrell's note, any of those things could make Dumbledore suspect him of leaning toward a dark wizard. He needed to reassure Dumbledore completely, or he'd have even less chance of winning his cooperation later. As Avada searched for the right words, something unexpected happened. Dumbledore made a small sound, and then a rush of footsteps echoed, as if from some distance, mixed with a rumbling voice. Professor, you said if anyone was wandering around at night, I should report it immediately. Someone's in the library, in the restricted section. It's Filch. Can you still turn invisible? If not, use my invisibility cloak. Please. Avada could have slipped into invisibility, but he knew Filch was only an illusion Dumbledore had conjured to herd them toward the Ericid mirror. He needed to be in front of that mirror today to explain things, both overtly and covertly, to Dumbledore. If necessary, he would drop his occlumency and let Dumbledore read his mind. He had to dispel every doubt. Restricted section? Then they can't have gone far. We'll catch them, Snape's voice said, the footsteps drawing nearer. Dumbledore was escalating the act. Harry eased Avada back a step at a time, trying to make no sound, his movements practiced and quick. He glanced around for a hiding place and spotted a door left slightly ajar on his left. He gestured to Avada with his eyes and slipped through, careful not to touch the wood. When the footsteps outside faded, Harry finally let out a long breath, pulled off the invisibility cloak, and hunched as if taking in air for the first time. After a moment, he turned back to Avada, bewilderment plain on his face. So, how are you here too? Avada smiled. He had already thought out how to face Dumbledore. I was waiting for you here, Harry. What? You knew I would come. This invisibility cloak was sent by you? Harry's eyes widened in surprise. Dumbledore's mental presence nearby twitched, as if surprised. No. Did you only receive this cloak today? No wonder you chose to come to the restricted section tonight. Harry looked even more puzzled. I can't really explain it. This is the first time I've revealed the secret. Avada lowered his voice deliberately. I sometimes see things, illusions that show me the past, the future, or clues. A few days ago, maybe the day you nearly fell off your broom, one told me you would come to the restricted section on Christmas night looking for information about someone named Nicholas Flamel. You know? Harry exclaimed. I know. And not only that, I tried to stop you. If you look through the Christmas present I gave you, you'll find that book contains detailed information about Nicholas Flamel. He's not some mysterious figure. He's famous. You wanted to stop me coming to the restricted section? Why? Harry sounded both surprised and suspicious. Are you afraid Gryffindor will lose points? But aren't you a Hufflepuff? Avada inwardly scoffed. This boy had clearly been spending too much time with Hermione. He also thought, if most of these words were meant for the old man behind them, he might as well use an explanation that would fool Harry too. It's not about points. I saw you would be troubled by a mirror, like you'd lost your soul, coming here every day for the next few nights and sitting for hours. See, it's that one. Harry looked where Avada pointed, and finally noticed something leaning against the far wall that didn't belong in this room, as if it had been placed there temporarily. It was an impressive full-length mirror reaching toward the ceiling, its gilded frame ornate and supported on claw-like feet. An inscription ran across the top, Erised stra heruoit ube kafru oit on wosi. Harry walked toward it. His face grew pale. He studied the glass more closely, drew even nearer until his nose nearly touched its surface, staring as if in a trance. Dad? Mum? Avada watched Harry's unmoving back and noted Dumbledore's mental quieting. After a moment, he cleared his throat softly to pull Harry from it. You saw your family in the mirror? No wonder you look so distracted. He feigned curiosity and leaned over. May I see? How enviable. I don't even know who my parents are or what they look like. Eh? Avada glanced at the mirror's reflection. A faint flash of relief crossed his features. Then he knitted his brow as if puzzled. Can you see them? Harry asked, hope flickering. No, what we see seems different, Avada murmured. He stared into the glass. I see myself opening a bakery. Huh? I'm baking in front of customers. There are so many people outside the shop. The queue is dozens of meters long. The bread I make is unusual. I've shaped them into various magical creatures. Ball-dodging birds, pygmy puffs, nifflers. I'm doing magic cooking with my wand, and the customers are praising it. Wait, those customers look like muggles. Dumbledore's mental presence surged suddenly, and Avada felt a familiar probing sensation skim his mind. The lightest brush of legitimacy, just enough to tell if he was being truthful. He sighed inwardly. Dumbledore was checking him, even if the old man's hand had been guided into it. Avada stopped blocking his thoughts intentionally. He let go of occlumency to show he had nothing to hide. Everything he had just said was true. He lingered before the mirror a while longer, then turned to Harry. "Read the inscription at the very top." Harry looked up and squinted at the string of letters that seemed meaningless at first. "Erised stra eru." "Read it backwards," Avada said. Harry hesitated, then spelled it out from right to left. "I show not your face, but your heart's desire." "This mirror reflects the deepest desire of one's heart," Avada said simply. Harry's expression went from awe to something else entirely, panic. "You want to break the international statute of wizarding secrecy?" he blurted. For a moment, he'd forgotten his imagined parents in the glass. After 6 months in the wizarding world, he had a fairly good idea how sacred secrecy was. Avada smiled without answering, but inwardly he sighed. This was the only way to break the vicious cycle of trust. At first, he had planned to use Lord Voldemort as an excuse. Tell Dumbledore he'd gone into the restricted section to finish homework Voldemort had assigned. But on second thought, Voldemort was a professor now. If there really had been homework, he could have written a note. Why sneak into the restricted section? In desperation, he had exposed himself as a prophet, claiming he was waiting for Harry. Otherwise, there was no plausible explanation for him secretly browsing the restricted section and studying dark arts. His ability to perceive magic directly was the worst secret he could not afford to reveal. By reading the books Professor Baker left behind, he had already learned what his power meant and the true nature of dark wizards. If people ever found out he could perceive magic, he dared not imagine the consequences. Professor Baker seemed to suspect his secret already. Although Baker had obviously underestimated him and was bound by a contract, the suspicion was still a hidden threat. It was as pressing as Voldemort himself, and the main reason Avada had been driven to study the Ji-Chi Tianya curse. But claiming to be a prophet brought another problem. It would weaken the trust he had been building with Dumbledore. Dumbledore might think Avada had come to him because Voldemort had encouraged it. But if Avada had actually seen the future and knew for certain Dumbledore would not harm him, the situation looked different. Worse, the combination of precognition, incredible talent, frequent contact with the dark arts, and studying under Voldemort could easily make Dumbledore draw ugly parallels to Grindelwald. Avada had to be meticulous. His goal now was to force Dumbledore to explicitly confirm that he would not follow Grindelwald's path. He intended to highlight the similarities long enough for Dumbledore to refute them, and in that contrast erase any lingering suspicion. "You first." Avada ignored Harry's astonished look and smiled as he asked, "Tell me, why are you suddenly so interested in Nicholas Flamel that you snuck into the restricted section for it? And you didn't ask anyone. Every student above 4th year who has taken history of magic can recite Flamel's accomplishments. If you'd asked around, you wouldn't have needed to risk the restricted section." Harry hesitated, then decided to trust the senior who had treated him well. "I think Professor Snape is trying to steal something kept in the 4th floor corridor, and that thing is related to Nicholas Flamel. So who exactly is he?" "The thing in the 4th floor corridor is Nicholas Flamel's?" Avada exclaimed, frowning. "So that's his plan." "What?" Harry said. Nicholas Flamel was a French wizard who lived over 600 years and made groundbreaking contributions to alchemy. He was an old friend of Headmaster Dumbledore's and collaborated with him on some research. Avada went on, his tone taking on the mellow authority of a teacher. His most famous achievement was the Philosopher's Stone, the fabled alchemical object. It can turn lead into gold and help produce the elixir of life. Flamel himself lived to be 600 because of it. "Then that's it," Harry's eyes lit up. "That huge dog must be guarding the Philosopher's Stone. Flamel gave the stone to Dumbledore for safekeeping, and Snape's trying to steal it. Who wouldn't want to live forever or have endless gold?" "It's not Professor Snape." Avada's answer was quiet but firm. "Huh? I can't tell you why, Harry, but I can guarantee that whoever's trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone is not Professor Snape." "You always defend the professors like Hermione does," Harry protested. "I saw it with my own eyes. On Halloween, Professor Snape sneaked into the 4th floor corridor during the troll fiasco and got bitten on the leg by that dog." "Let's not keep arguing about this. I insist it isn't Snape, but I can't tell you why I know. It would be dangerous." Avada's expression tightened. I was inadvertently drawn into this, so I'm the one bearing the risk. Spreading that risk doesn't make it safer for anyone. Dumbledore knows I'm involved and agrees to it. His guarantee keeps me safe. Hearing that, Harry stopped questioning. Avada's mention of Dumbledore's protection carried weight. And to be honest, Avada added with a slight, rueful smile, being involved has had its benefits, some of my previous advantages, my temporary invisibility and my ability to read in the dark, I learned while taking part in this matter. He didn't say that those particular forbidden magics had been taught to him by Lord Voldemort, not by any noble curriculum. Having satisfied Harry's curiosity about Nicholas Flamel, Avada steered the conversation back to a subject that had been on his mind, the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy. I've been thinking about that law, he said. Changing something so deeply embedded would bring chaos. That's not what I want. Still, I can't help imagining a world where muggles and wizards walk together openly. Why? Harry asked, curiosity bright in his face. He knew scant things about this senior whose name he didn't even know. Avada's eyes softened with memory. When I first realized I had magic, I was 6 or 7, shy, introverted. I was terrified of being seen as a monster, of being rejected, isolated. Magic felt so mysterious and wonderful. I practiced it secretly because it was the only thing that made me feel alive. One day, 3 boys saw me. I panicked. I thought my worst fear had come true. But instead of mocking me or running away, they came over with wide-eyed curiosity and begged me to show them more. After I checked, they wouldn't spread the secret. I had 3 new friends. Avada could almost hear Dumbledore's soft breathing as he continued. What struck me most was something one of them said when I asked them not to tell. Why would you think that? How wonderful it is to have magic. If I could use it to help people easily, to make them happy, and to be thanked, I'd be overjoyed. Even after he grew up, saw how people's hearts could be less pure than a child imagines, and learned about the Statute of Secrecy, that line stayed with him. It had been carved into him from the start. 74. The ideas brought by Baron Fate is strange. The story Dumbledore had told earlier, which sounded so much like Ariana Dumbledore's tale, had actually been his own. When Avada first felt his magic awakening, his past life memories were only partially recovered. His mind was immature and disoriented. The fragments that had returned told his young self about the world's complexity and cruelty, and he panicked. Coupled with his heightened magical senses, that fear shaped the shy, withdrawn boy he had been. It was those children from that time who planted the seeds of kindness in him. Once his memories came back in full and he recognized that he was living in the world of Harry Potter, that seed took root and grew, letting him view this familiar yet strange world differently. It probably explained why he'd been sorted into Hufflepuff. What he'd seen in the Mirror of Erised was simple, a calm, peaceful life, himself having afternoon tea, chatting on the phone with a friend, smiling sometimes gently, sometimes openly. After thanking Dumbledore for the information about Nicholas Flamel, Harry put on his invisibility cloak and left. Dumbledore stood stunned for a moment and then vanished as well. Only Avada remained, turning over what had just happened. If Dumbledore had been moved by what he said and had confirmed his sincerity with legitimacy, then Dumbledore shouldn't be suspicious of him anymore. But that might also mean he'd be watched more closely. His identity as a prophet was now out in the open, so next year he could target that diary without hindrance. But how to deal with the basilisk? Let it sleep in the Chamber of Secrets until it starved, or drag it out and kill it outright. He couldn't decide. One thing still puzzled him. Why was the magic structure of Harry's invisibility cloak so similar to Thestral's? He remembered the core of the old wand was Thestral tail hair. If so, at least 2 of the 3 Deathly Hallows were connected to Thestrals. What was going on? He pushed the thought aside for now. The most important thing was Lord Voldemort. He still couldn't bring himself to scare Harry away from the Philosopher's Stone by telling him about Voldemort. It was unfair to Harry, perhaps, but Harry was the only one who could stand before Voldemort and guarantee absolute safety. Avada cast a disillusionment charm on himself and walked back to the Hufflepuff common room. He would have to be careful about going into the restricted section. He could make an excuse to wait for Harry today. But if Harry stopped coming, and he still needed to go, and Dumbledore found out, how would he explain it? Fortunately, the Ji-Chi Tianya curse let him observe the outside world from the spatial interlayer. Otherwise, this would have been impossible. As long as Dumbledore didn't live in the restricted section, he could always find an opportunity to sneak in and read. Better yet, he could take books into the spatial interlayer and use Lumos to read them, avoiding the problem of losing awareness of the outside while concentrating. The next day, when he tried to sneak into the restricted section again, he saw through the spatial interlayer a surge of bright magical energy that made him wary. Over the following days, he kept noticing it. When he took books out now, he'd hide in the interlayer and read by Lumos within a small bubble charm, which slowed his progress considerably. During that period, Harry dragged Ron to see the Mirror of Erised once, and then came back a few more times on his own. Though he wasn't as entranced as in the original story, he stayed maybe 10 minutes each visit. Dumbledore still found reasons to appear, give Harry a sort of counseling, and ultimately moved the mirror. By the end of the Christmas holidays, Avada hadn't unearthed any new magical principles, but he did pick up a lot of miscellaneous dark arts knowledge. Baron had returned to school the day before term resumed, and that evening he hauled Avada grimly into the room of requirement. "So what happened?" Baron demanded. Avada blinked at him, bewildered. Had the wit-sharpening potion Baron had given him gone wrong? He'd checked it carefully with his senses. It seemed fine. Baron sneered at Avada's innocent expression. "When I went home, I found the prophecy orb Professor Baker gave me last year and used it." A cold premonition settled in Avada's stomach. What did it show about me? How dangerous would it be if I investigated Professor Quirrell's background deeply? Baron pulled a black crystal ball from his pocket and shoved it nearly against Avada's nose. Up close, the image inside was clear. 6 stars. Extremely dangerous. Professor Baker had somehow given the orb a single-use prophecy function. Once a month, the user could divine how dangerous a proposed action would be, shown as 1 to 7 stars, 1 being safest, 7 being most deadly. The fact it stopped at 6 might be because Baron was a Slytherin pureblood, or because Voldemort was still weak and restrained under Dumbledore's watch. "You've put yourself under a 6-star danger level for an entire term," Baron exploded. "According to the manual, 6 stars is life-threatening, and this was just investigating. You stuck by his side an entire semester. How little do you value your own life?" Avada watched Baron's furious face, swallowed, and made his decision. "Lord Voldemort." "What?" Baron snapped. "The real Lord Voldemort, the one who was thought to have vanished 10 years ago, is hiding inside Quirrell." If this had been anyone else, Avada wouldn't have revealed such a thing so bluntly. But Baron already knew the defense against the dark arts professor was dangerous. Not being clear would only invite disaster. Baron's face went pale. "You knew? And you still." "I have a chance to finish him completely this year," Avada said. Baron fell silent for a long time, then stared at Avada like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Finally he muttered, "Are you insane?" "On the contrary," Avada said calmly, "I've never been clearer-headed. Remember what Professor Baker told me? I've got some small secrets. Those secrets can restrain the now very weak Voldemort. I've spent half a year confirming it." "You told Dumbledore?" Baron asked, suddenly more relaxed at the name. "Yes, Dumbledore knows what I'm doing, so don't worry too much. We have a detailed plan." Baron still looked uneasy. "But that's Lord Voldemort. What was Dumbledore thinking, letting a second-year student face him alone?" Avada kept reassuring him, while mental gears turned. Why would Professor Baker give his crystal ball that odd prophecy function? Hadn't he scried his fate before his main soul was taken? Wait, main soul into a Horcrux? Horcrux, of course. If Avada couldn't use soul merging to draw souls, why not store a soul fragment in a Horcrux instead? If Voldemort had hidden his main soul in a Horcrux, that explained a lot, and it gave Avada an idea. "Thanks, Baron," he blurted, and bolted for his dormitory, paper and quill already in mind. He had to write down these inspirations and start experimenting immediately. 75. Hunting unicorns? After he returned to his dorm, Avada took a cautious sip of the luxurious wit-sharpening potion Baron had given him, then pulled out the massive book Professor Baker had left behind. He also produced a blank notebook and began to draw and write. Third section. The essence of Horcrux magic, found it. The method for making a Horcrux, he muttered. And the sixth section. The experimental records that unknown dark wizard left when he simplified Horcrux magic. Here they are. He spread the notebook on the bed and flipped through the pages rapidly. Then, with quick, precise strokes, he began copying and annotating furiously. Each section was dense, and the 6 key parts alone took up nearly a third of the whole book, making it hard to skim. After a long while, he straightened and hit the bedpost with a dull thud. It seems possible. If he used the soul transfer method described for creating a Horcrux, Lord Voldemort's pitifully small remaining main soul would be no problem. He only needed a larger, sturdier vessel. With the mental power data he'd accumulated on Voldemort, he could even forcibly extract the soul without Harry having to kill Quirrell's body. But 2 problems remained. First, the spell required preparation time. During that period, Voldemort could still move freely, and with his absurd ability to escape, even Dumbledore might not keep him contained. Second, the main soul, even sealed inside a Horcrux, could remain conscious and continue to exert mental power, just as Professor Baker had spoken and manipulated spatial charm from within a Horcrux last year. If Voldemort retained that ability, he might be able to break free on his own. Dumbledore certainly didn't understand Horcruxes as deeply as Voldemort did, and Avada himself still had gaps. No one could guarantee containing him, and until all the Horcruxes were destroyed, the main soul couldn't be eliminated directly. Just getting rid of the piece on Harry's body alone could take who knew how long. He needed a way to render Voldemort's soul, or at least his mental power, dormant after sealing it in a Horcrux, but no such magic was known. If Horcruxes were easily neutralized, they wouldn't be the pinnacle of dark arts. According to the records, even the lowest quality Horcrux could resist a Dementor's kiss. This is troublesome. He was still thinking when a warmth threaded up his right arm, the call from Voldemort. Why now? Avada tucked the huge book and his notebook away and hurried to the Defense Against the Dark Arts office on the 3rd floor. He knocked. "Professor, did you call for me?" Quirrell opened the door, smiling. Voldemort preferred to use Quirrell's face when summoning him, controlling the host's body. "Have you mastered the Imperio?" he asked casually, an offhand question that would land most in Azkaban. "Yes, I can cast it stably now, but I can't do it non-verbally yet." "Show me." Voldemort flicked Quirrell's wand, and a Grindylow flew out from the teaching supplies cabinet, hovering in front of Avada and brandishing its sinewy claws. "Imperio," Avada whispered the charm. The Grindylow's gaze went vacant for a moment, then refocused with a clarity and rationality that was not natural for a beast. It drifted to the ground, turned toward Quirrell, and bowed. In truth, Avada's Imperio was already effectively nonverbal. 2 months earlier, he had cast it on a troll and watched the spell's structure closely. His ongoing research into mental power had deepened his skill significantly. He suspected that he could even force control over an Auror for a short time, enough to meet the standard of a seasoned Death Eater, at least in matters of mental magic. Other areas had suffered from his focus, but his control now was formidable. "Very good," Voldemort said, satisfied. "With your current level, you can take part in some of my plans." "You mean the plan to restore your body? Who do I need to control?" Avada asked, surprised and eager. "Not that yet." Voldemort shook his head. "If you want to join that, you must at least reach Quirrell's level." To test Avada's progress, Voldemort often had Quirrell spar with him. Avada knew the gap. Without using his predictive sense, Quirrell could defeat him in under 3 minutes, even with Avada holding back. "But you can help me with another important matter," Voldemort continued, studying Avada's disappointed expression with something like amusement. He smiled. "After some time, I will take you into the Forbidden Forest. We will hunt a unicorn." "Hunt a unicorn?" Avada blinked. He had expected tasks of manipulation and infiltration, not a hunting party. "Do you need the usual unicorn materials?" "Those are easy to buy," Voldemort said. "Tail hair, horn fragments, any decent apothecary sells them, and some even have horns. What I want is not those common things." His smile turned colder. "I need fresh unicorn blood. That cannot be obtained from any shop, not even the black market." "Why?" Avada asked, curiosity winning out. For ordinary people, drinking unicorn blood prolongs life, but curses the drinker to a half-dead existence, Voldemort replied. Those so-called curses are nothing to me. He spoke with the confidence of someone whose curses lasted decades. Voldemort had no cause to fear such a price. In canon, too, he had drunk unicorn blood and survived. You need to prolong your life? Are you injured? Avada asked, surprised. Ha! Who could hurt the great Lord Voldemort? Voldemort scoffed, as if the question were absurd. I am not wounded. I merely need to restore some strength in advance to prepare for the final plan. When we hunt the unicorn, you will do the drinking, he went on. You must not be forced into a struggle or scream. Control it with Imperio when we find one. Make it obedient and still. The killing and the drinking will be Quirrell's responsibility. I understand, Avada said, firm. He nodded. I will do it well. 76. Money giving boy Voldemort. Good. Lord Voldemort nodded in satisfaction, looking at Avada's steady, loyal posture. Anything else? Normally that line would have been his cue to leave, but Avada watched Voldemort's expression for a moment longer before hesitantly asking, Professor, you seem very happy today? Voldemort's magical structure was only a hair's breadth from being fully analyzed. Just 5 more minutes. No, 3 minutes. Well, you noticed. Voldemort was indeed in a very good mood. I accomplished something important over the Christmas break. Something important? Avada echoed, curious. What was it? I obtained a dragon egg. A dragon egg? Are you planning to raise a dragon to attack Hogwarts? But then the school would... Voldemort laughed at the naivety of the question, amusement lingering before he composed himself. No, of course not. Dragons don't obey anyone, and a half year isn't enough for them to mature. Even if an adult dragon did attack Hogwarts, any competent professor could handle it. Dragons, are that weak? Avada asked, genuinely puzzled. In the original stories, dragons are formidable, and the Ministry rates them as XXX class dangerous. How could they be weak? Voldemort sneered. Otherwise, where would wizards get dragon heartstrings, dragon hide gloves, dragon claw powder, and dragon's blood used so commonly? Wizards now farm dragons like livestock. Anyone who's terrified of dragons or fascinated by them is either weak or foolish. I got the egg to deal with such fools, he added. Sorry, Professor, I don't quite follow. If dragons are that weak, what use is a dragon egg? Avada blinked and asked purely. Voldemort suddenly changed the subject. You've been to that 4th floor corridor, haven't you? Avada hesitated, then replied, No, Dumbledore warned us about that corridor, and I didn't want to attract his attention, so I've never gone near it. Very prudent. Voldemort seemed pleased. Good choice. Behind that door is a Cerberus. It's dangerous for someone like you, 3 heads, which conveniently counters Imperio. Even Quirrell couldn't take it down without making a huge scene. And the thing it guards is what can restore my body. It used to be in Gringotts, but Dumbledore was uneasy, worried I'd break into Gringotts to steal it, so he moved it to Hogwarts. So even though Quirrell, working with my aid, has already breached Gringotts, he came up empty. You can breach Gringotts, Avada exclaimed. There's nothing I can't do, Voldemort said lightly. Quirrell spent a term chasing leads and discovered that the Cerberus had been bought last year by Rubus Hagrid, that clumsy oaf who obsesses over dangerous beasts. Hagrid probably knows how to get past that dog. So you plan to use the dragon egg to trade for information with Hagrid? Avada said, catching on. Quick to grasp, but that's not the whole plan. Hagrid is loyal to Dumbledore, more loyal than any beast, so he won't divulge things Dumbledore told him to keep secret. He's also got many weaknesses, and heavy drinking is one of them. Picture a man obsessed with monsters seeing a dragon egg while drunk. Ha ha! Then he'll answer anything, more honest than after Veritaserum. Avada chuckled, then offered, Do you need me to inquire about anything with him? Hagrid's not very distrustful of Hufflepuffs, like Dumbledore. No need. The plan is already perfect. All right. Avada nodded, and the conversation wound down. Voldemort's magical structure data had finally been fully recorded, so he no longer needed to linger. Oh, Professor, may I see the dragon egg? He asked before leaving. He was curious, and Voldemort didn't suspect him anymore. Besides, what harm was there in seeing it? You wizards your age are always curious, Voldemort said, and with a flick of his wand, a large wooden box floated out of the storage room and opened. The box was lined with thick, soft padding. In the center lay an egg larger than a human head, pitch black, with no shine. Its surface was rough and scaled, looking more like a sacrificial relic than an egg. Avada stared, then rubbed his eyes in disbelief. As he gaped, Voldemort raised Quirrell's eyebrows and said coolly, "What, are you as fascinated by this thing as that fool Hagrid?" "Sorry, Professor. It's just my first time seeing a dragon egg," Avada stammered, looking away from it, but keeping his magical senses trained on the object. Everyone talks about how terrifying dragons are, and Gringotts supposedly even trains dragons to guard their most important vaults. "They're fools," Voldemort snorted, waving his wand to send the box back into the storage room. "Gringotts fell to me without trouble. Now go on. Leave." "Goodbye, Professor." Avada stepped out, closed the door, and rubbed his eyes again. He should go back to bed. He'd woken up too early, after all. But no. That dragon egg had a magical structure specifically designed to suppress a dragon hatchling's mental powers. That was exactly what he'd been dreaming about half an hour earlier. Magic to suppress mental power. Of course, dragon hatchlings are naturally strong-willed and energetic. Their mental faculties wouldn't remain dormant forever. Eggs need an enchantment to keep the hatchling's mind subdued until the proper time. The enchantment would dissipate after a set period or when exposed to fire, which is why mature dragon eggs hatch quickly in heat. With a minor modification, it would suit his purposes perfectly. Thanks to the lingering effects of the wit sharpening potion, his brain had easily internalized that magical structure. He had to take advantage of the potion's clarity and hurry back to record the information and his insights. Why is it that everything I need to deal with Voldemort comes from Voldemort himself? He thought with amused disbelief. Mental data, Horcrux knowledge, techniques related to mental power, and now this egg's magic. Could he be Voldemort's lucky charm? The weeks after the start of term were relatively peaceful. Ever since Lord Voldemort's mental imprint had been fully analyzed, and with the inspiration from the dragon egg, progress on the magical traps had accelerated dramatically. They would probably be finished in another month or two. Avada had learned enough that he no longer needed to sneak into the restricted section every day. Baron knew he had important work to finish and didn't bother him much. He even told Avada where to buy the extravagant wit-sharpening potion. The bottle he'd been given for Christmas hadn't lasted 2 weeks. It turned out the thing cost a ridiculous 15 galleons a bottle, 3 or 4 times the price of a normal wit-sharpening potion. Avada had been shocked when he first saw the bill, but the compensation from the Department of Mysteries was more than he could spend, so his finances could cover it. Harry must have told Ron and Hermione about the Philosopher's Stone and Avada's situation, because the trio hadn't been prowling the library like they had last semester. Now, whenever they saw Avada, they would give him an encouraging smile. Good, Avada thought. Be thankful they're not pestering me with questions. Probably because I mentioned Dumbledore. He sipped his black tea, set his pen down, and looked up at Shabby. So what's so special about this Quidditch match? There are still 2 games before the finals, right? We've already seen Potter's Nimbus 2000, and Cedric's counter tactics are solid. Dumbledore's coming to watch the match in person, Shabby cried, clearly excited. He's never bothered with Quidditch before. In previous years, he usually skipped the school finals, but this time he's coming himself. I don't know why, she went on, but if it gets Dumbledore's interest, this match must be important. Avada thought, yes, important for keeping an eye on Lord Voldemort. He took another sip and answered calmly, is he coming to supervise Snape? Snape's suddenly the referee. Maybe Dumbledore wants to make sure he doesn't deduct too many points from Gryffindor. Impossible, the nearby Quidditch captain protested. This isn't a class. Where would he get the power to dock points? He doesn't even understand Quidditch. He couldn't find fault with the Gryffindor players, even if he tried. And if he insisted? Someone asked. Then Professor McGonagall would probably pelt him with tomatoes, the captain grumbled. But why is Snape refereeing? He doesn't know Quidditch, and it's not Slytherin playing Gryffindor this time. If anything, Snape will favor us and go after Gryffindor, another said. Is that an unfair win? It's fine. It balances out the advantage the Nimbus 2000 gives them. Avada returned to his notebook and continued to sketch and write. All right, I'll go watch it too, just to unwind. Good. But seriously, why is Snape the ref? Someone persisted. Avada was puzzled as well. If Dumbledore himself was coming, did Snape really need to stand referee and personally watch Harry? And was Harry affected by Snape's presence? He could almost imagine it, Snape saving your life while making you want to punch him. Typical professor. 2 days later at the Quidditch pitch, Hufflepuff versus Gryffindor. The players were tense but excited. Harry, in particular, had nearly keeled over from nerves when he'd heard Snape would be refereeing. Dumbledore's arrival, though, changed everything for him, and Avada had told him that Dumbledore knew someone was after the stone, which eased his mind. He could focus on Quidditch without that constant gnawing fear. Teams, mount your brooms. Snape stood in the center with a grim expression and read the rules in a monotonous voice, then blew his whistle. Rolf, a fifth year who was explaining tactics to Avada and the other newer players, spoke up as he moved around the pitch. He was busy with OWL prep and assisting Professor Kettleburn most of the time. Quidditch matches were his rare chance to relax. The Nimbus 2000 beats the Cleansweep 7 in speed, maneuverability, and braking, Rolf explained, and someone like the Seeker from Gryffindor has only just mastered it. To give Cedric a chance to win the snitch, we need to expand our coverage so that wherever the snitch appears, someone's there to intercept. That leaves our defense scattered, he added. It'll be harder to block opponents when they break through. Gryffindor's already scored 2 goals, but that was expected. See, Professor Snape just gave us 2 penalty shots, someone called from the stands. That compensates for the scattered defense. Avada thought, what happened to everyone being honest? The tactic is meticulous, taking into account every inside and outside factor. No way that was purely Slytherin machination. Never mind, I'm not innocent either. With these 2 penalty shots, the score's even. Harry's staying out of the scrum and searching for the snitch up high, completely ignoring our setup. We'll win. Don't. Before anyone could stop him, Harry dove across the pitch and almost knocked Snape off his broom. Potter. Snape snapped, pale-faced. It's not assault, Professor. Harry's mouth twitched into a smile. He held the golden snitch high in front of Snape. It's over. I caught the snitch. The stands exploded into noise. No one could remember a match where the snitch had been caught so quickly. Cedric and the Hufflepuffs looked dumbfounded. All their tactics were brilliant, but you can't plan for the snitch appearing right under your opponent's seeker. Harry dropped off his broom a foot from the ground, utterly unable to believe it had happened. The match was over in under 5 minutes, and he had made Snape look foolish in front of everyone. As the Gryffindors swarmed the pitch, Snape landed beside Harry, face tight with anger. What did I tell you? Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Facing the resentful stares of the Hufflepuffs, Rolf forced a dry laugh. I think. Still arguing? I'll curse your dinner, someone snapped. It was the sort of petty curse used in Hufflepuff squabbles. Hit with it and you feel continuously full for half a day, making all food taste foul. Cruel, in a small domestic way, and perfect for settling team disputes without duels. An hour later, Harry left the changing rooms alone, happier than he had any right to be. He'd finally done something he could be proud of. Nobody would call him just a famous name anymore. The night air felt sweet, and the last hour replayed in his head. Gryffindors hoisting him onto their shoulders, Ron and Hermione jumping in the stands. He wandered to the broom shed, leaned against the wooden door, and looked up at Hogwarts, its windows glowing red in the setting sun. He'd succeeded. He'd finally beaten Snape at something. Then he saw a hooded figure slip quickly down the castle steps, moving like someone who didn't want to be seen, and hurry toward the Forbidden Forest. The joy drained from Harry's face. He recognized the furtive stride. It was Snape. While everyone else stayed for dinner, Snape was sneaking into the Forbidden Forest. What was he up to? Harry vaulted back onto his broom and shot into the night. He glided silently over the castle and saw Snape running toward the Forbidden Forest. He followed him. The trees closed around him and blurred his sight. He circled lower and lower until he was almost skimming the treetops when he finally heard voices. He drifted toward them and landed soundlessly on a tall branch, holding himself perfectly still in the canopy. Through the leaves, he could see a shadowed clearing below, Snape standing there, and opposite him, Professor Quirrell, trembling more than Harry had ever seen him. Quirrell stammered, his words chopped into frightened fragments. I don't know why you chose to meet here, Severus. What do you think? Snape answered coldly. Are we going to discuss how to steal the Philosopher's Stone from right under Dumbledore's nose? Quirrell began to mutter, but Snape cut him off, impatient. Have you figured out how to get past that blasted three-headed dog yet? Severus, you don't want to make an enemy of me, Quirrell. Snape stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. I don't know. Quirrell stumbled backward, on the point of tears. Snape sneered. If you insist on playing games with your little secret trick, I'll be waiting. But I don't. Very well. Snape shrugged, pulling his cloak up as if annoyed by the whole conversation. I'll give you time to think it through. Once you decide where your loyalties lie, we'll speak again. Then he swept out of the clearing. It was almost completely dark now, and Harry watched Quirrell stand motionless like a statue, small and helpless beneath the trees. Harry, where have you been? Hermione shrieked as soon as he was back. We won! You won! We won! Ron slapped Harry hard on the back. Everyone's in the common room. There's a whole celebration. Fred and George nicked cakes from the kitchen. Hufflepuff didn't even stop them. Forget the party, Harry panted. Find an empty classroom. I have something important to tell you two. They found a vacant classroom, shut the door, and sat down. Harry told them exactly what he had seen and heard. So our guess was right, Hermione said when he finished. It is the Philosopher's Stone, and Snape is trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked about getting past the three-headed dog and mentioned Quirrell's little secret trick. But Harry's face went pale. Ken swore the person trying to steal the stone was definitely not Snape. The three of them fell silent at once. You saw him with your own eyes, Hermione said finally. It's Snape who wants the stone. What does that mean? Ron muttered. Could Ken and Snape be working together? Ron asked. Seems unlikely. Harry shook his head. Snape's always favored Slytherin. Plenty of Hufflepuffs have complained about that. Ken might have a Slytherin friend, but that doesn't prove anything. Don't forget, when Snape tried to hurt me, the Bloody Baron helped. I think Ken might have been fooled by Snape. He's a good student, like Hermione, inclined to trust professors. Hermione shot him a hard look that made him take half a step back. Isn't that how you felt before you actually saw Snape try to harm me? Harry had no answer for that. Hermione pressed on. Even if he was tricked, there's another possibility. We can't rule out that Ken is actually working with Snape. His background is mysterious. No one even knows his real name. If he has a particular agenda, his involvement with the stone would make sense. And if he's on Snape's side, Ron added, then maybe the whole thing about Nicholas Flamel and Dumbledore knowing is a lie, meant to stop you investigating. Going to him alone could put you straight into Snape's hands. Then I'll go to Dumbledore, Harry said. You might not be able to see him, Ron warned. His office needs a password to enter. Only professors know it. The staff have worked with Snape a long time. They won't easily suspect him, and we still don't have proof. They looked at each other, the empty classroom suddenly very small. Hermione sighed. Let's start with Hufflepuff. Find out what subjects Ken's best at and which professors he spends time with. We can make a rough judgment from that. That's all we can do for now, Ron agreed. They left the classroom and headed down to the underground level where the Hufflepuff common room opened onto the kitchens. As they neared the barrels by the kitchen entrance, someone looked up. Harry, Ron, Hermione, what are you doing here? Avada said, surprised to see the three of them. Oh, nothing. We just... Hermione stepped forward with a practiced smile. We're a bit peckish and thought we'd see if there's anything to eat. I'm so jealous you Hufflepuffs are right next to the kitchens. You must eat whatever you like whenever you like. Avada watched them, reading more into their nervousness than they meant to show. If their tension, their panic, their suspicion had been any less obvious, he might have believed her. Instead, he guessed why they were acting like this, that they had finally caught sight of Snape and Quirrell's secret meeting, or found some other leverage against Snape, and were now suspicious he was involved. The problem was, they were right to be suspicious, only not in the way they suspected. He really was in league with Snape. In truth, he and Snape were both working for Dumbledore, spies planted close to Voldemort, not merely allies, colleagues. How should he mislead them next? 79. Principal, please. All right, I believe you. Keep making it up. Ken squinted at the three students in front of him. They really did seem determined to pin their fate on him. Oh, if Harry Potter could stop Avada Kedavra, then everything would be fine. The three of them exchanged looks for a moment before Harry lifted his head first. Ken, can you come with us for a moment? What we need to tell you is important. It's about that night at Christmas and what you told me. He stopped and began frantically signaling with his eyes. Right. Ken followed them to the empty classroom where they'd often discussed things. As soon as the door closed, Harry asked eagerly, Ken, you said Professor Snape couldn't possibly want to steal the Philosopher's Stone. Can you tell us why? I'm afraid I can't, Ken said. He shook his head. He couldn't simply blurt out Snape's role like that. But what would you think if I told you we had solid evidence that Snape is trying to steal the stone? Harry stepped back a little. Ron clenched his fists. Hermione's hand slipped to her wand. You don't have to look so ready for a fight, Ken said dryly, rolling his eyes at their expressions. You should have tucked your wand somewhere less obvious before following me. Ron, why are you clenching your fist? Where's your wand? You think I lied to you. You think I'm in league with Snape, who's trying to steal the stone, Harry said. And how do you plan to explain that? Hermione added, and without waiting she drew her wand, though she didn't point it straight at Ken. Come with me. After a long pause, the three of them stepped aside. Ken pushed the door open and beckoned them along. I'll take you to Professor Dumbledore. Let him explain. He was done trying to dodge their suspicions. If Dumbledore wanted to raise the Chosen One, let the headmaster deal with the fallout. Ken's time wasn't going to be wasted untangling this. You can see Dumbledore? Of course. I even know the password to his office. It's on the 8th floor. They climbed to the 8th floor and came to the stone gargoyle. Ken stopped, then opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Does anyone here know how to roll their R's? He asked awkwardly. The password is an Italian word. Ken explained. I just can't make that sound. Hermione stepped forward. Tell me how it's written and which part needs the rolled R, and I'll say it. Excellent. Ken said the ridiculous word, and Hermione pronounced it perfectly. The gargoyle just stared. That's an old password, it declared flatly. It was changed a long time ago. Oh, you should have said that earlier, Ken said and brightened. Fizzing whizbees. Lemon drops, peppermint humbugs, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, chocolate frogs, treacle tart, cockroach clusters. At last the gargoyle leapt aside. Although I'd rather not let you in like this. Ken gave the gargoyle a smug look and led the still puzzled trio through the doorway. He didn't bother reminding it that it could be set to lock out a specific person after too many wrong passwords. They climbed the spiral staircase and Ken knocked on the wooden door. Professor Dumbledore, Ken, he called. Ken? The headmaster repeated as he opened the door. Dumbledore sat at his desk, spectacles pushed up on his nose. Mr. Ken, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, what can I do for you? Ken sighed. During the Christmas holiday, Harry and I exchanged some information, and we deduced that what's stored in the 4th floor corridor is Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone. He didn't mention that Dumbledore had been present when the information was exchanged. That wasn't something he was supposed to know. Harry insisted that Professor Snape wanted to steal the stone. I told him it wasn't Snape, but just now they came to me, claiming they have evidence Snape is trying to steal it. They know more than they should, and that could cause trouble. I thought you should decide what to do. Dumbledore nodded, then turned to Harry and the others. So you know that the stone is in the 4th floor corridor? Yes, Professor, they answered nervously. And you believe Professor Snape is trying to steal it. Tell me why. Harry told Dumbledore, quickly and exactly, about what he had seen and heard in the Forbidden Forest. Dumbledore listened, stroking his beard. I understand, Dumbledore said when he finished, smiling at them. Thank you for your concern about Nicholas Flamel's matter and for your willingness to investigate. But I can assure you the Philosopher's Stone is well protected and very safe, Dumbledore continued. Besides myself, the deans of the 4 houses, Professor Snape, and Professor Quirrell have all laid defensive enchantments. Hagrid has even provided Cerberus. You can imagine how comprehensive the protections are. I know, Professor, but Snape, Harry began. It is Professor Snape, Harry, Dumbledore corrected gently. He's trying to get past those protections. He's forcing Quirrell to find a way past Cerberus. Harry's words rushed out. Do not worry, Dumbledore said calmly, waving a hand to stop him. I appointed Professor Snape for reasons I am aware of. As for the stone, there is no cause for alarm. Ken felt his eyelids twitch. Dumbledore had been elegantly vague, saying nothing that might actually reassure Harry and the others. He doubted such remarks would dissuade them. If they learned about Cerberus's weakness, or that Dumbledore had left town, Ken suspected they would still run to the fourth-floor corridor to confront the supposed thief. They might end up injuring, or worse, something that could not be easily destroyed in its current ghostly state. What Dumbledore would do if he received an anonymous warning, or whether he would go along with Ken's plans, remained uncertain. 80. Research completion and hunting. In the end, Harry and his two friends had gone in confused and come out still confused, while Avada, who had been scheming in secret, followed behind them. Sorry, Ken. As soon as the door to the headmaster's office closed, Harry offered a guilty apology to Avada. Hermione and Ron looked equally ashamed. We misunderstood you. No big deal, Avada shrugged. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably think the same. After all, Professor Snape really does not seem like a good person. The three of them nodded repeatedly, eager to agree with him. As for the scene you saw of Professor Snape coercing Professor Quirrell, to be honest, I don't know exactly what happened, but as you saw, Professor Dumbledore didn't react, which at least means it's still within his expectations and control. Avada continued, so like Dumbledore said, you don't need to worry too much about the Philosopher's Stone. From your description, even Professor Snape stumbled at the dog, so who else could get past it? Besides, Dumbledore is still here. As long as Dumbledore remains at the school for even one more day, the stone is absolutely safe. No doubt about it. He smiled and then turned to go downstairs alone, leaving them to talk it over. In doing so, he helped Dumbledore by reinforcing their trust in Cerberus. And Dumbledore, without interfering with Dumbledore's plan, if his own plan failed or wasn't accepted, he'd need a plan B. He couldn't allow Lord Voldemort to be left alone at the end of the corridor examining the Mirror of Erised and then actually manage to take the stone. Voldemort was a wizard on Dumbledore's level. Even weakened and dulled as he was, he might still break Dumbledore's wards. No more dithering. Time to research. A few weeks later, in the room of requirement, Avada checked the neatly written letter before him. Dear Principal Dumbledore, I send you my sincere greetings. I am an adventurer from the United States. Regrettably, I cannot disclose my exact name and identity for certain reasons, but that is not the point. The point is this. I have found a way to deal with Lord Voldemort. I obtained information through my channels and have confirmed that Lord Voldemort may be after a Philosopher's Stone this year. I also know you are a friend of Nicholas Flamel, the creator of that stone, and I have always heard that you are the person Voldemort fears most. I have therefore decided to give this method to you, hoping it will be of some help. When I was young, I explored in Albania and encountered Lord Voldemort's wandering spirit. At that time, I was unfortunately seduced by him and thus possessed. During that possession, my consciousness regained clarity for a time, and I used some tricks to secretly record all of his mental power data, which allowed me to break free. After this, I used the data to design a set of trap magic tailored to Lord Voldemort. My strength is insufficient to face him directly, so I decided to give this magic to you. The principle of the magic is sealing. As you know, since Voldemort escaped death 11 years ago, killing him now may not be easy. I think imprisoning him thoroughly and then slowly finding a way to eliminate him is a better approach. Enclosed are 5 notebooks, 4 containing Voldemort's mental power data, and 1 describing the principle and setup for that trap magic. Wishing you health and all the best. Avada looked at what he had just written and approved. He double-checked that the 5 notebooks copied by the Quick Quotes Quill bore no handwriting or identifying information, wrapped them carefully, erased all traces from the package, and finally put on a pair of gloves before picking it up. Next, I just need to go to Hogsmeade and send this to Dumbledore via the owl post. With that, he cast the Ji Tianya curse and vanished into the spatial interlayer. No need for secret passages. In an alley in Hogsmeade, a hooded, bandaged figure materialized. He walked briskly to the owl post, used a voice altered by potion to speak with the clerk, paid, and watched an owl lift off with the package. Relieved, he turned to leave. Now that I'm here, I might as well see Hogsmeade properly. I haven't been to Honeyduke's, the Three Broomsticks, or the Shrieking Shack yet, and Zonko's joke shop might have stuff worth studying. He stopped cold as the dark mark on his right arm heated up. Voldemort was calling. At this time, is he finally moving on the unicorn? Avada's heart tightened. He slipped into a side alley, activated the Ji Tianya curse, mounted his broom at full speed, and was back in his dormitory in less than half a minute. He shoved the prepared package into his pocket and ran to the third floor to knock on the Defense Against the Dark Arts office door. "Professor, you called for me? Is it time to start the hunt?" he asked, once he was inside and the door closed behind him. "That's right." Lord Voldemort nodded, mouth quirking. That fool Hagrid finally fell for it. Tempted by that dragon egg, he spilled everything. I have already learned how to bypass that dog silently. Once I drink unicorn blood to recover a bit of strength, I can go and take that thing whenever I like. Hagrid will probably still be playing with his stupid dragon. Oh no, perhaps he'll have already been discovered and expelled. This hunt will be led by Quirrell, with you accompanying him. I will rest and adjust my state. Call me when the unicorn is killed. As he spoke, Quirrell's expression changed and his body trembled. Quirrell himself had returned. "Then, Ken," he said mildly, without his usual stutter, "I will cast a disillusionment charm on you so you can follow me unseen. Don't be too nervous. Unicorns have little resistance to the Imperius, and with your strength, you can easily control them." He produced his wand and tapped Avada's shoulder. A familiar cold sensation swept over him. Quirrell's disillusionment charm was about the same level as Avada's, but seemed slightly more refined. "Let's go." Quirrell went downstairs and left the castle, with the invisible Avada close behind. Before leaving, Quirrell changed into a pitch-black, hooded cloak. Guided by him, they slipped deep into the forbidden forest. "Lead the way for me." Quirrell twirled his wand and nodded toward where it pointed. "Just as expected, the unicorn is that way. Don't make a sound. Follow me."